What do you do when the company you've poured your heart into for 15 years betrays you? Jessica had dedicated years to TechVantage, creating the very technology that drove their success. But when she was suddenly pushed out, she knew exactly what was happening. Her invention was being stolen. Determined to take back what was hers, Jessica had a plan that would leave TechVantage scrambling. Stay tuned to see how Jessica takes control and secures her future. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories. Jessica, after 15 years with TechVantage. "We're restructuring your position," Karen Thompson announced, her voice barely concealing a sense of satisfaction. She sat across from me in the small, sterile conference room, flanked by Ashley from HR. Both wore carefully constructed expressions of corporate regret, as if they were performing in some well-rehearsed play. "The company is moving in a new direction," Ashley added, sliding a manila folder across the table. "Your contributions have been valuable, but we're consolidating the research division under the product development team." I nodded slowly, accepting the folder without opening it. I didn't need to see what was inside. It would be the standard severance package: 2 weeks of pay for every year of service, 3 months of continued health coverage, and a list of career counseling resources I would never use. "I completely understand," I replied, my voice steady, betraying none of the emotion that had been swirling inside me for weeks. "These decisions are never easy." The relief that flashed across their faces was almost comical. They expected a scene: tears, protests, anger. After all, I was a 55-year-old woman, being pushed out of the tech industry where experience was discarded in favor of youth. What they didn't know was that I had been anticipating this moment for weeks, ever since a misdirected email thread had popped up in my inbox last month. "We'd like you to clean out your desk by Friday," Karen continued, her tone growing more confident with every word. "We'll need your keycard, company laptop, and phone before you leave. Your team will be notified this afternoon." My team. The 6 brilliant engineers I had personally recruited and mentored over the years. The same team that had helped me develop the distributed processing algorithm powering TechVantage's flagship product, AccountSphere accounting software used by over 40% of the Fortune 500 companies. I stood, feeling the weight of it all settle into my chest. "Of course," I said, voice calm. "Is there anything else?" They exchanged glances, clearly thrown off by my composure. Karen recovered first, her voice more clipped now. "That's all for now. Thank you for making this professional." As I walked back to my office, I passed the glass-walled conference room where the executive team was meeting. Through the transparent barrier, I saw Chad Lawson, the CEO, gesturing animatedly at a PowerPoint presentation titled Q3 Revenue Projections. The same Chad Lawson who had taken credit for my algorithm at last year's industry conference, referring to me only as one of our research team members. I closed my office door behind me and pulled out my personal phone, sending a single, succinct text message. "It's happening. Friday is my last day." The reply was immediate. "Perfect timing. Contracts are ready. Dinner tonight to finalize details." A small smile crept onto my face as I looked at the calendar on my desk. Today was Wednesday. Friday I would walk out of TechVantage for the last time, and Monday would be fascinating. That evening, I met Mark Sullivan at Meridian, an upscale restaurant far from the reach of TechVantage's headquarters. As the CEO of Precision Systems, TechVantage's largest competitor, Mark understood the value of discretion. He had reserved a private dining alcove in the back, shielded from prying eyes by elegant Japanese screens. "They actually did it," Greg said, shaking his head after we ordered. "I suspected they might, but to cut the very person who developed their core technology." "Chad never understood what I actually created," I replied, sipping my water. "He saw the implementation, the user interface, the marketing potential, but the underlying architecture, that was just tech stuff to him. The irony was almost too perfect. 3 months ago, I discovered the patent application for my distributed processing algorithm had never been filed by TechVantage's legal team. An oversight, they'd claimed when I inquired. They'd assured me they'd handle it immediately, but something about their response had seemed off, prompting me to check the company's internal documentation. That's when I found it. A strategy memo outlining plans to claim the algorithm as company-developed technology without specific inventor attribution. They'd planned to push me out before securing the patent, knowing intellectual property developed by employees typically belongs to the company. What TechVantage didn't know was that I'd already been working on refinements to the algorithm on my own time using my personal equipment. Those improvements, which dramatically increased processing efficiency by 43%, weren't covered by my employment agreement. I'd quietly filed for a patent under my own name last month, fully documented with timestamps and development logs that clearly showed the work was completed outside of company time. The patent had been granted with remarkable speed thanks to Greg's introduction to a top-tier IP attorney. "All the paperwork is finalized," Greg said now, sliding a folder across the table. "As soon as you sign, Precision Systems officially acquires exclusive licensing rights to your patent. The press release goes out Monday morning, announcing you as our new Chief Innovation Officer." I reviewed the documents carefully, though I'd already memorized the key terms: a 7-figure signing bonus, substantial equity in Precision Systems, and ongoing royalties from all products using my algorithm. "What do you think Chad's face will look like when he realizes what's happened?" Greg asked, unable to hide his satisfaction at the prospect. "I'm more concerned about my team," I admitted. "They don't deserve to be caught in the fallout." Greg nodded. "Already addressed. We have positions for all 6 of them if they're interested. Senior roles with significant raises." I signed the final page and closed the folder. In one elegant move, I had secured my future, protected my team, and ensured recognition for my work. "To new beginnings," Greg said, raising his glass. "And to owning your own value," I added, clinking my glass against his. Thursday and Friday passed in a blur of exit interviews, knowledge transfer meetings, and saying goodbye to colleagues. I maintained my professional composure throughout, even as rumors spread across the company. Administrative assistants gave me sympathetic glances in the hallways. Junior developers approached awkwardly, asking if I'd provide LinkedIn recommendations before I left. I documented everything meticulously, every project, every password, every process, knowing full well that TechVantage would soon discover just how thoroughly they needed me to be. My decision to leave comprehensive transition notes wasn't kindness, it was evidence. Evidence that I had acted in good faith, while the company had not. During my final exit interview on Friday afternoon, Ashley from HR went through the standard checklist with mechanical efficiency. "You understand that any intellectual property developed during your employment remains the property of TechVantage," she stated, pushing a non-disclosure agreement across the table. "Of course," I replied pleasantly. "Anything developed within the scope of my employment, using company resources during company time." I emphasized those qualifiers slightly, but Ashley was too busy checking boxes to notice. "And you affirm you have no copies of proprietary company information?" "I have taken nothing that belongs to TechVantage," I confirmed truthfully. The patent was mine, after all. As I packed the personal items from my desk, family photos, a collection of conference badges marking 15 years of industry events, the coffee mug my team had given me last Christmas, Karen stopped by, leaning against my doorframe with artificial casualness. "I just wanted to check that everything's clear for your departure," she said, watching me place items into a cardboard box. "Crystal clear," I replied, wrapping a small award I'd received for the very algorithm now at the center of my plans. The irony wasn't lost on me as I carefully placed it between layers of tissue paper. "You know, Jessica, these restructuring decisions are never personal," Karen continued. "Chad feels the company needs to move in a more youthful direction." I looked up and met her gaze directly. "I understand completely. Business is business." Something in my tone made her hesitate. For a split second, uncertainty flickered across her face, but she quickly wiped it away, no doubt convinced that a soon-to-be unemployed 55-year-old woman had nothing left to offer. "Will you be taking some time off?" she asked, her voice laced with an artificial note of concern. "Actually, I already have something lined up," I replied, my words measured. "I start Monday." Her eyes widened with surprise. "That's fast. Anything interesting?" A smile tugged at my lips. "Very. A leadership position. I'm quite excited about it." She nodded absently, already moving on in her mind to the next task. Well, good luck with that. As I walked out of TechVantage's sleek glass headquarters for the final time, keycards surrendered and personal belongings packed, I took a moment to look back at the building that had been my home for 15 years. On the top floor, I could see the executive conference room lit up for an evening meeting, probably discussing how they'd redistribute my responsibilities to younger, less experienced, and far cheaper staff. What they didn't know was that in less than 72 hours, that same room would be hosting an emergency crisis meeting instead. Monday morning broke bright and clear, and I dressed carefully in my new charcoal suit, a power outfit I'd specifically bought for today. At 7:30 a.m., the Precision Systems town car pulled up, ready to take me to their headquarters where I'd begin my first day as Chief Innovation Officer. The press release went live at 7 o'clock a.m., Greg informed me as I settled into my new corner office, the floor-to-ceiling windows giving me an unobstructed view of the city. Industry newsletters are already picking it up. I've got the communications team monitoring reactions. The announcement had been crafted with surgical precision. Precision Systems acquires exclusive rights to revolutionary processing algorithm. Welcomes creator Dr. Jessica Jennings as Chief Innovation Officer. It outlined my role as the sole inventor of the patented technology, how Precision Systems would integrate the algorithm into their next generation of products, and most crucially, that any company currently using the tech would need to negotiate licensing agreements with Precision going forward. At precisely 9:15 a.m., my phone lit up with the first text from my former team at TechVantage. "Complete chaos here. What did you do?" It was from Mike, my lead developer. I smiled, typing back, "Check your personal email. All 6 of you have offers waiting." Meanwhile, 8 miles away at TechVantage, the scheduled Monday morning executive meeting was quickly turning into something much more dramatic. According to Mike's updates, Chad had arrived to find the company's general counsel and chief financial officer waiting for him, both ashen-faced. The industry announcement had hit their inboxes simultaneously, sending immediate shockwaves through the leadership. By 9:30 a.m., what should have been a simple start-of-week meeting had morphed into a full-blown crisis session. Board members were calling in remotely. The legal team was frantically poring over my employment contract and the documentation surrounding the algorithm's development. "They're pulling every file with your name on it," Mike reported. "Someone just wheeled in all the servers from the research division for the tech team to analyze." I could picture it perfectly. Chad pacing the conference room, demanding answers from Karen and the legal department. The stock would already be reacting to the news. Investors loathe uncertainty, and this announcement had created a lot of it. At 10:45 a.m., I received an email from Chad himself, the desperation practically emanating from my screen. "Jessica, there appears to be a misunderstanding. Please call me at your earliest convenience to discuss." I forwarded it to Precision Systems' legal team without responding. By noon, the industry was buzzing with speculation. TechVantage's stock had dropped 7% since the market opened, while Precision Systems had seen a 12% increase. 3 different technology journals had requested interviews with me about the strategic coup that had shaken the accounting software industry. "How are you feeling?" Greg asked, stopping by my office as I settled in. "Validated," I replied honestly. 15 years of watching others take credit for my work, of being told I should be grateful just to have a seat at the table. And now, finally, recognition. My new executive assistant appeared at the door. "Dr. Jennings, the development team is ready for you in the main conference room." She hesitated. "TechVantage's CEO has called 4 times in the last hour." "Please let him know I'm in meetings all day," I replied calmly. "I'll have our legal team reach out to discuss licensing options later this week." As I walked toward my first meeting as Chief Innovation Officer, my phone buzzed with another update from Mike. "Board just called emergency session. Chad looks like he's about to explode. P.S. My team and I accept your offer. When can we start?" By Tuesday morning, the full impact of my departure had become clear to everyone at TechVantage. Their flagship product, AccountSphere, relied entirely on my algorithm to process the massive data sets that gave it an edge over competitors. Without licensing rights to my patent, they faced 2 equally unpalatable options: negotiate with Precision Systems or rebuild their core technology from scratch. a process that would take years and millions in development costs. Chad has called an all-hands meeting for 2:00 p.m., Mike texted. It was his last day at Tech Vantage. He and the rest of my former team would be starting at Precision Systems next Monday. Rumor is they're going to try to sue you. I forwarded his message to our legal department, who responded almost immediately. Let them try. Your documentation is impeccable. Development logs, timestamps, personal equipment usage, all clearly established. We've prepared for this scenario. Meanwhile, I was settling into my new role with remarkable ease. The respect I received at Precision Systems was a stark contrast to my final years at Tech Vantage. When I spoke in meetings, people actually listened. My ideas weren't repackaged by male colleagues and presented as their own. My age and experience were viewed as assets rather than liabilities. The engineering team is implementing your efficiency improvements, Greg informed me during our afternoon briefing. Early testing shows a 51% performance boost, even better than we projected. I had several refinements I never shared with Tech Vantage, I admitted. After I discovered they were planning to eliminate my position, I saw no reason to give them my best work. Their loss, our gain, Greg replied with a satisfied smile. Speaking of which, the first licensing inquiry came in this morning. Not from Tech Vantage yet, they're still in denial, but from data flow systems. They're worried about being caught in the crossfire. At 3:30 p.m., Mike sent a detailed account of Chad's all-hands meeting. The CEO had tried to project confidence, assuring the staff that Tech Vantage would vigorously defend our proprietary technology. But the anxiety in the room had been palpable. Several employees had already updated their LinkedIn profiles, sensing the company's vulnerability. Karen looked like she was about to faint when someone asked directly if they'd failed to secure the patent, Mike reported. Chad cut the question period short after that. By Wednesday, the industry fallout had intensified. 2 major clients had contacted Precision Systems about switching from AccountSphere, concerned about Tech Vantage's ability to maintain the product without the algorithm's creator. Our stock had risen another 8%, while Tech Vantage's continued its decline. I received a call from Ashley in HR, the same woman who had slid my severance package across the table just days earlier. Jessica, she began, her voice carefully professional, I'm calling to discuss the, situation with your patent. We believe there may have been a misunderstanding about ownership rights. I don't think there's any misunderstanding, I replied calmly. My employment agreement clearly states that intellectual property developed on my own time using my own resources remains mine. The patent documentation confirms exactly that. Chad was hoping you might consider coming in to discuss options. Any discussions would need to go through Precision Systems' legal department now, I responded. I'm sure they'd be happy to set up a meeting to discuss licensing terms. The silence on the other end was deafening. Finally, Ashley sighed. I'll pass that along. That afternoon, I stood in front of Precision Systems' board of directors, leading my first formal presentation. I outlined our technology roadmap with my algorithm at its core. For the first time, I wasn't hidden in the back, relegated to the sidelines like I had been at Tech Vantage. I was at the head of the table, and I could see Greg's approving nod from across the room. By Friday, just 1 week after walking out of Tech Vantage for the last time, the company had plunged into full crisis mode. Their stock had plummeted 23% from Monday's opening bell. Concerned calls from major investors flooded in. Analysts churned out speculative articles with titles like, Can Tech Vantage Survive the Algorithm Crisis? And How One Strategic Blunder Could Cost a Tech Giant Everything. Through my industry contacts, I learned that Chad had finally come to terms with the magnitude of the disaster. Tech Vantage was now faced with a stark choice. Either license my algorithm from Precision Systems at inflated rates, which would gut their profit margins, or rebuild AccountSphere from scratch without using any of the technology covered by my patent. They've started interviewing for a new development team, Mike told me during our Friday video call as we discussed his upcoming transition to Precision Systems. Chad's claiming they can recreate the functionality in 6 months. See, I couldn't help but laugh. The original algorithm took me 3 years to perfect, and that was with an intimate understanding of the problem space. Exactly, Mike agreed. Nobody's buying the timeline, especially after your team posted their resignation letter at the same time. The knowledge drain is huge. That afternoon, TechVantage's attorneys finally reached out to Precision Systems, hoping to open negotiations about licensing. Our legal team, following the strategy we had outlined, responded with terms that were technically fair but strategically brutal, 3 times the industry standard licensing rate, plus a public acknowledgement of my role as the inventor of the technology. They'll balk at the acknowledgement more than the cost, Greg predicted as we reviewed the response in his office. Chad's ego won't let him admit that he pushed out the person who created their core technology. Then they'll have to rebuild, I replied, feeling the weight of the advantage we now held. Every day they spend trying to replicate my work is another day we extend our lead in the market. The following Monday, just 10 days after my unceremonious dismissal, I led the first meeting with my newly assembled innovation team. Mike and 5 other engineers from TechVantage were now on board, and the energy in the room was electric as we mapped out the next evolution of my algorithm. "This is how development meetings should be," commented Amy, one of my former team members at TechVantage. "We spent half our time explaining basic concepts to executives who wouldn't listen anyway." "That's the difference between being valued and being seen as replaceable," I replied. "Here, your expertise is recognized." As we wrapped up the productive session, my assistant appeared at the door. "Dr. Jennings, there's been a significant development with TechVantage. Their board just announced an emergency leadership change. Chad Lawson is stepping down, effective immediately." The news spread quickly. Within hours, industry publications were reporting that TechVantage's board had lost confidence in Chad's leadership following the patent oversight that threatened the company's flagship product. Karen Thompson was also out, along with the head of legal who had failed to properly secure the patent. That evening, I received an unexpected email from Richard Donovan, TechVantage's newly appointed interim CEO. Unlike Chad's desperate message from the previous week, this one was straightforward and respectful. "Dr. Jennings, congratulations on your new position. I've been brought in to help TechVantage navigate the current situation. I'd like to discuss a fair licensing arrangement for your patented technology. We're prepared to acknowledge your contributions publicly and make appropriate amends for the oversights of previous management. Would you be available to meet next week?" I forwarded the email to Greg, adding a simple note: "Phase 1 complete." His reply came quickly: "Beautifully executed. The board is celebrating your first major chati for Precision Systems. Looks like TechVantage is finally learning an expensive lesson about valuing innovation and innovators." 3 months after my departure from TechVantage, I sat on the stage at the National Technology Innovation Conference, preparing to deliver the keynote address. The audience was filled with industry leaders, technology journalists, and aspiring developers, many of whom now knew my story. "And now I'm pleased to introduce our keynote speaker," the conference organizer announced. "Dr. Jessica Jennings, Chief Innovation Officer at Precision Systems and creator of the distributed processing algorithm that has revolutionized data handling across multiple industries." The applause echoed through the room as I approached the podium. What a difference a few months could make. Just last year, I had attended this same conference as part of the TechVantage delegation, sitting in the back while Chad took center stage, presenting his company's innovations. "Thank you," I began, scanning the faces before me. "Today, I want to talk about innovation, ownership, and the importance of properly valuing intellectual contributions, no matter where they come from." My presentation walked through the technical intricacies of my algorithm, but it also addressed the broader, more urgent issue of respect and recognition within the technology sector. Without directly mentioning TechVantage, I highlighted the need for companies to protect their innovators rather than treat them as replaceable assets. Afterward, during the reception, a group of young women engineers approached me, eager for advice and mentorship. One of them, barely 30, shared, "Your story changed how I document my work. I've started keeping detailed logs of my development process on my own time." "Smart," I said. "Your innovations deserve protection." As the evening wound down, I checked my phone and saw a news alert flash on the screen. TechVantage finally announces licensing agreement with Precision Systems, acknowledging Dr. Jessica Jennings by name as algorithm's creator. Their stock had stabilized, but at a much lower valuation than before my departure. 1 year to the day after being told to clean out my desk, I sat in my spacious office at Precision Systems, reviewing the quarterly innovation report. Under my leadership, the company had launched 3 groundbreaking products based on my algorithm, capturing significant market share from TechVantage and other competitors. A knock at the door interrupted my analysis. It was Greg, holding a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses. "Happy anniversary," he said, setting the glasses on my desk. "The board asked me to share this news with you personally before the public announcement. Precision Systems has officially surpassed TechVantage in market valuation for the first time in company history." I smiled, not with triumph, but with quiet satisfaction. That's what happens when you value innovation properly. As Greg poured the champagne, my assistant arrived with a sleek envelope. Inside was an invitation to speak at the Women in Technology Annual Leadership Summit. The topic: Owning Your Intellectual Value, How Proper Documentation Changed an Industry. "Nay, you've become something of an icon, you know," Greg remarked, noticing the invitation. "The story about the executive who didn't recognize what she had until it was gone has become a cautionary tale in corporate boardrooms." Richard Donovan, who had remained TechVantage's CEO after the crisis, had implemented sweeping changes to how the company recognized and rewarded innovation. Their new policies on intellectual property protection and inventor recognition were reportedly modeled after the program I had established at Precision Systems. "It was never about revenge," I said, raising my glass in a toast. "It was about recognition, about showing the industry that innovation isn't anonymous. It comes from real people who deserve real credit." "To proper recognition," Greg agreed, clinking his glass against mine. As the afternoon sun poured through the office windows, I reflected on my journey. At 56, I had finally found what had eluded me throughout my career. Not just success, but acknowledgement. My name was now permanently attached to the algorithm that had transformed an industry exactly where it belonged. What do you do when your contributions are taken for granted, when the very work you created is stolen and credited to someone else? Do you quietly walk away, or do you make sure the world knows exactly what you've done? Jessica had spent 15 years pouring her heart and soul into TechVantage, developing algorithms that powered their flagship product. Yet, when the company decided to cut her loose, they expected her to simply accept their severance package and fade into the background. But Jessica had been planning her move for months. What they didn't know was that she had already filed a patent for the algorithm under her own name. The moment she walked out of TechVantage, she secured her future with a leadership position at Precision Systems and a licensing deal that would leave TechVantage scrambling. Within days, her former company's stock plunged, and they were forced to acknowledge her groundbreaking work at a cost far higher than they had ever anticipated. But Jessica didn't do it out of spite. She did it for recognition, for the respect she had earned but never received. And as the world watched her rise, she showed that sometimes the best way to win is to walk away, own your value, and let the world come to you. So, what would you have done in Jessica's shoes? Would you have let them take credit for your work, or would you have fought back? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you liked this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more.
The scent of lavender fabric softener clung to Peter's shirt as I pulled it from the dryer. It was a comforting smell, one that usually brought a smile to my face. But not today. Today, as I reached into his pocket to check for loose change before folding, my fingers brushed against something cold and metallic. I fished it out, my heart racing as I uncurled my fingers. There, nestled in my palm, was a delicate gold wedding band. But it wasn't mine. Hannah? Peter's voice echoed from downstairs. "Have you seen my blue tie?" I froze, the ring burning in my hand. "Just a minute," I called back, my voice surprisingly steady. I quickly slipped the ring into my own pocket and grabbed his tie from the laundry basket. As I descended the stairs, Peter was pacing in the living room, checking his watch. "There you are," he said, barely looking up. "I'm running late for my meeting." I handed him the tie, studying his face. Did he know I'd found the ring? Was there a flicker of guilt in his eyes? But he just gave me a perfunctory peck on the cheek and headed for the door. "Peter," I said, my voice catching. He turned, eyebrows raised. I I was thinking we could have dinner together tonight. It's been a while since we've had a proper meal, just the two of us. He sighed, checking his watch again. I don't know, Hannah. This project is really heating up. I might be working late. Oh. I tried to hide my disappointment. Well, maybe tomorrow then? We'll see, he said, already halfway out the door. Don't wait up. The slam of the door echoed through the empty house. I sank onto the couch, my hand instinctively reaching for the ring in my pocket. 20 years of marriage, and this is what it had come to. Secrets and lies wrapped in a gold band that wasn't mine. I pulled out my phone, my finger hovering over my best friend Maggie's number. But what would I say? Hey, Mag, I think my husband's cheating on me. The words stuck in my throat. Instead, I found myself dialing another number. It rang twice before a cheerful voice answered. Moore and Associates, how may I direct your call? Yes, hello, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I'd like to speak with someone about hiring a private investigator. There was a pause on the other end. Of course, ma'am. I'll transfer you to Mr. Moore. May I have your name? I hesitated, then squared my shoulders. Hannah Thompson. As I waited to be transferred, I caught sight of our wedding photo on the mantel. Peter and I, young and in love, beaming at the camera. When had that happiness slipped away? And more importantly, how had I not noticed? The line clicked and a deep voice came on. Mrs. Thompson, this is Jack Moore. I understand you're interested in our services. I took a deep breath, twisting my ring on my finger. Yes, Mr. Moore, I need your help. I think my husband is having an affair. There was a moment of silence. Then Mr. Moore spoke again, his voice gentle but professional. I'm sorry to hear that, Mrs. Thompson. Can you tell me what's led you to this conclusion? I opened my mouth to respond, but the words caught in my throat. How could I explain the years of growing distance, the late nights at the office, the way Peter's eyes no longer lit up when he saw me? And now, the damning evidence of that other ring, hidden away in Peter's pocket like a dirty secret. As I struggled to find the right words, I heard the front door open. My heart leapt into my throat. I'm sorry, Mr. Moore, I whispered urgently. I have to go. I'll call you back. I ended the call just as Peter walked into the living room, his brow furrowed. Hannah, who were you talking to? I plastered on a smile, hoping he couldn't hear the pounding of my heart. Oh, just Maggie. Girl talk, you know? He nodded absently, already loosening his tie. Listen, I forgot some files I need for my meeting. I'll be heading back out in a minute. As he climbed the stairs, I felt the weight of the other woman's ring in my pocket, a silent accusation against the man I thought I knew. In that moment, I made a decision. I wouldn't confront Peter. Not yet. First, I needed answers. And I would get them, no matter the cost. I couldn't sleep that night, tossing and turning as memories of Peter and I flooded my mind. How had we gone from that bright-eyed couple to this? I glanced at Peter's sleeping form, his back turned to me. When had that become the norm? As dawn broke, I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake him. In the kitchen, I absently stirred my coffee, lost in thought. The first time I met Peter flashed before my eyes. A chance encounter at a bookstore, both of us reaching for the same novel. You have excellent taste, he'd said, flashing that charming smile that made my heart skip a beat. We'd spent hours talking that day about books, dreams, life. It felt like I'd known him forever. Now, 20 years later, I wondered if I'd ever really known him at all. The sound of Peter's footsteps jolted me back to reality. He entered the kitchen, already dressed for work. Morning, he mumbled, barely glancing my way as he poured his coffee. I took a deep breath. Peter, I was thinking, maybe we could take a weekend trip soon? Just the two of us? He frowned, checking his phone. Hannah, you know how busy work is right now. I can't just take off. It doesn't have to be now. I pressed. Maybe next month? We could go to that little B&B we loved, remember? Peter sighed, finally looking at me. Look, I appreciate the thought, but now's not a good time. Maybe later, okay? As he turned to leave, I felt something inside me snap. When is it ever a good time, Peter? When was the last time we did anything together? He paused, his back to me. Hannah, don't start. I don't have time for this right now. You never have time, I exclaimed, my voice rising. You're always working, always busy. It's like I don't even exist anymore. Peter whirled around, his face flushed with anger. What do you want from me, Hannah? I'm working my ass off to provide for us, and all you do is complain. His words hit me like a slap. All I do, I've dedicated my life to our home, to you. And this is how you repay me? For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of guilt in his eyes, but it was quickly replaced by cold indifference. I have to go, he said flatly. We'll talk about this later. As the door slammed behind him, I sank to the floor, my body shaking with sobs. How had we become strangers living under the same roof? With trembling hands, I pulled out my phone and dialed Mr. Moore's number. It was time to face the truth, no matter how painful. Mrs. Thompson, his calm voice answered. I'm glad you called back. Are you ready to proceed? I took a deep breath, steeling myself. Yes, Mr. Moore, I need to know the truth about my husband. I understand, he replied. Can you tell me about any suspicious behavior you've noticed? I hesitated, then spilled everything, the late nights, the emotional distance, and finally, the ring I'd found. As I spoke, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. That's certainly concerning, Mr. Moore said when I finished. We'll start our investigation immediately. But Mrs. Thompson, I must warn you, are you prepared for what we might uncover? The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. Was I ready to have my worst fears confirmed, to have my entire life upended? I have to know, I whispered, more to myself than to Mr. Moore. Whatever it is, I need to know the truth. Very well, he replied. We'll be in touch soon with our findings. As I ended the call, I noticed a text from Peter. Working late tonight, don't wait up. My fingers hovered over the keypad, a dozen angry responses flashing through my mind. Instead, I simply replied, okay. I looked around our home, filled with memories of happier times, photos of our wedding, our honeymoon, holidays spent together. Each image now felt like a mockery of what we'd become. Whatever Mr. Moore uncovered, I knew one thing for certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. And as that realization sank in, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. The worst was yet to come, but for the first time in years, I was ready to face it head on. The manila envelope sat on the kitchen table, taunting me. Mr. Moore had delivered it personally this morning, his face grim as he handed it over. Mrs. Thompson, he'd said, I think you should prepare yourself. Now, hours later, I still couldn't bring myself to open it. The truth I'd been seeking suddenly felt too heavy to bear. But as I heard Peter's key in the lock, I knew it was now or never. Hannah? Peter called out, his voice echoing through the house. You home? I took a deep breath, steeling myself. In the kitchen. He walked in, loosening his tie. His eyes fell on the envelope. What's that? Why don't you tell me, Peter? I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I pushed the envelope towards him. Go ahead, open it. Confusion flickered across his face as he reached for it. Hannah, what's going on? Just open it, I repeated, my heart pounding. As Peter pulled out the contents, photographs, hotel receipts, a transcript of a damning phone conversation, I watched the color drain from his face. Hannah, he started, his voice low. I can explain. Explain. I cut him off, anger surging through me. Explain how you've been lying to me for months, how you've been sneaking around with her. I grabbed one of the photos, shoving it in his face. It showed Peter and a young blonde woman, locked in an intimate embrace outside a hotel. Who is she, Peter? How long has this been going on? He ran a hand through his hair, sighing heavily. Her name's Amber. We met at a conference 6 months ago. It just happened. It just happened, I repeated incredulously. For 6 months. And what about this? I pulled out the other woman's wedding ring from my pocket, the one I'd found in his laundry. Peter's eyes widened in recognition. Where did you? It doesn't matter, I snapped. What matters is that you've been living a double life, Peter. You've made a fool of me, of our marriage. Oh, come on, Hannah, Peter scoffed, his initial shock giving way to defensiveness. It's not like our marriage has been perfect. When was the last time you did anything besides play housewife? His words hit me like a slap. Play housewife? I've dedicated my life to our home, to you. And that's the problem, Peter shouted, slamming his hand on the table. You've become nothing but a housewife. Where's the woman I fell in love with, the one with dreams and ambitions? I stared at him, stunned. So this is my fault? Because I chose to support you, to build our life together? Peter's face softened slightly. Hannah, that's not what I meant. It's just, things change, people change. And instead of talking to me about it, you decided to cheat? I felt tears stinging my eyes. Was I really that unimportant to you? Of course not, Peter said, reaching for my hand. I jerked away. Hannah, please, we can work this out. I'll end things with Amber. We can go to counseling. No, I cut him off, my voice firm. There's no coming back from this, Peter. You've broken us beyond repair. So that's it? Peter's voice rose again. 20 years of marriage, and you're just giving up? I'm not the one who gave up, I shot back. You did that the moment you decided to betray me. We stood there, the weight of 2 decades crumbling between us. Finally, Peter spoke, his voice cold. Fine. If that's how you want it, I'll call my lawyer in the morning. As he stormed out of the kitchen, I called after him, Peter! He turned, a flicker of hope in his eyes. Don't forget to take your girlfriend's ring with you, I said, tossing it at his feet. The sound of the front door slamming echoed through the house. I sank into a chair, my body shaking with sobs. Everything I thought I knew, everything I'd built my life around had just shattered. But as the initial shock subsided, I felt something else stirring within me. A spark of determination. Peter might have broken my heart, but I refused to let him break my spirit. Whatever came next, I would face it head on. This wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning of a new chapter. The house felt emptier than ever as I wandered from room to room, unable to settle. It had been 3 days since my confrontation with Peter, and he hadn't come home since. Part of me was relieved, but another part, a part I hated, missed him desperately. I found myself in our bedroom, staring at the photos on the dresser. 20 years of memories, now tainted by betrayal. As I picked up our wedding photo, something inside me cracked. What if I had overreacted? What if there was still a chance to save our marriage? Before I could talk myself out of it, I grabbed my phone and dialed Peter's number. It went straight to voicemail. Peter, it's me, I said, my voice shaking. I think we need to talk. Please come home. Hours passed with no response. I paced the living room, rehearsing what I'd say when he arrived, how I'd apologize for my anger, how we could work through this together. But as night fell, the house remained silent. Just as I was about to give up hope, I heard a key in the lock. My heart leaped as Peter walked in, looking tired and disheveled. Hannah, he said, his voice wary, I got your message. I took a deep breath. Peter, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have reacted so harshly. I think if we just talk. Stop. He cut me off, holding up a hand. Hannah, I'm only here to get some clothes. I'm staying at Amber's for now. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. You're living with her? Peter sighed, running a hand through his hair. It's complicated, Hannah. But yes, I am. But I called to apologize, to try and work things out, I stammered, feeling foolish and small. Work things out? Peter laughed bitterly. Hannah, our marriage has been over for a long time. We were just going through the motions. That's not true, I protested weakly. We can fix this, Peter. We can go to counseling, try to reconnect. I don't want to fix it. Peter exploded, his face flushed with anger. Don't you get it? I'm in love with Amber. She understands me in a way you never have. I felt like I was drowning, grasping for anything to keep me afloat. But what about our life together? Our home, our memories. Peter's expression softened slightly. I'm sorry, Hannah. I truly am. But I can't keep living a lie. Amber's pregnant. We're starting a family together. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Pregnant, I whispered, my voice barely audible. How long have you known? A few weeks, Peter admitted. I was trying to find the right time to tell you. Anger surged through me, momentarily displacing the shock. The right time? Was that before or after you let me humiliate myself by begging you to come back? Peter at least had the decency to look ashamed. I'm sorry, Hannah. I never meant for things to end this way. As he turned to head upstairs, presumably to pack his things, something inside me snapped. You're sorry? I shouted, following him. You destroy our marriage, get another woman pregnant, and all you can say is you're sorry? Peter whirled around, his face contorted with frustration. What do you want from me, Hannah? I've made my choice. It's time for you to accept it and move on. Move on? I laughed hysterically. You've taken everything from me, Peter. My trust, my love, my future. What exactly am I supposed to move on to? For a moment, I saw a flicker of the man I'd fallen in love with in Peter's eyes, but it quickly vanished, replaced by cold determination. That's not my problem anymore, Hannah. I'll have my lawyer contact you about the divorce proceedings. As Peter disappeared into our bedroom, no, his old bedroom, I stood frozen in the hallway. The life I'd known, the future I'd planned, was crumbling around me. But as the initial shock wore off, I felt something else rising within me, a fierce, burning anger. Peter might think he'd taken everything from me, but he was wrong. I still had my dignity, my strength, and as I listened to him pack, I made a decision. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of my revenge. The divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday, a crisp manila envelope that felt like a death sentence for my marriage. I stared at Peter's signature, the familiar scrawl now seeming cold and foreign. My hands shook as I reached for the phone, dialing my sister Kate's number. "Hannah, what's wrong?" Kate's concerned voice came through. "He's really doing it, Kate," I choked out. "Peter's filed for divorce." "Oh, honey," Kate sighed. "I'm coming over. Don't you dare sign anything until I get there." An hour later, Kate was at my kitchen table, poring over the documents. Her brow furrowed as she flipped through the pages. "Hannah, have you read this thoroughly?" I shook my head, still numb. I just saw his signature and... Kate's face hardened. "Well, you need to read it. Peter's trying to screw you over." Those words jolted me out of my stupor. "What do you mean?" "He's claiming that since you were just a housewife," Kate spat the words, "you're not entitled to half of the assets. He's offering you a pittance, Hannah." Anger flared within me, momentarily displacing the grief. How dare he? I supported him through law school, I managed our home. "I know, sis," Kate interrupted gently, "but Peter's a lawyer. He knows how to manipulate the system." As the reality of the situation sank in, a new wave of despair washed over me. "What am I going to do, Kate? I don't have any money of my own. How can I fight this?" Kate squeezed my hand. "You're not alone, Hannah. We'll figure this out." Just then my phone buzzed with a text. It was from an unknown number. "Mrs. Thompson, this is Jack Moore. I have some information you need to see. Can we meet?" I showed the message to Kate, explaining about the private investigator I'd hired. "Hannah," Kate said slowly, "I think you need to meet with him. Peter's playing dirty. It's time you fought back." The next day, I met Mr. Moore at a quiet cafe. He slid a thick folder across the table. "Mrs. Thompson, what I found goes beyond just the affair." With trembling hands, I opened the folder. Inside were bank statements, property deeds, and offshore account details. My eyes widened as I realized what I was looking at. "Peter's been hiding assets," Mr. Moore explained. "Significant ones. He's been preparing for this divorce for months, maybe even years." The betrayal cut deep, but something else was rising within me. A fierce determination. "What does this mean for the divorce?" Mr. Moore leaned forward. "It means you have leverage, Mrs. Thompson. Peter's committed fraud. If this comes to light, he could lose his law license." As the implications sank in, I felt a strange calm settle over me. "Thank you, Mr. Moore. You've been incredibly helpful." Leaving the cafe, I called Kate. "I need you to recommend a good divorce lawyer," I said, my voice steady. "The best you know." "Hannah?" Kate sounded surprised by my tone. "What happened?" "I'm done being the victim, Kate. Peter thinks he can walk all over me. He's about to learn how wrong he is." That evening, as I sat in my empty house, I pulled out an old photo album. Pictures of Peter and me in happier times stared back at me. I traced Peter's face in our wedding photo, remembering the man I thought I'd married. "You should have been honest with me, Peter," I whispered to the smiling face. "Now all bets are off." I closed the album with a snap, my mind made up. Tomorrow I'd meet with a lawyer. I'd fight for what was rightfully mine. And Peter? He was about to discover that the just a housewife he'd dismissed was a force to be reckoned with. As I climbed into my bed that night, I felt something I hadn't in weeks. Hope. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of my comeback. The sleek office of Sarah Goldstein, divorce attorney extraordinaire, felt like a war room. Spread across her desk were the documents Mr. Moore had provided, along with the insulting divorce papers Peter had served me. "Hannah," Sarah said, her eyes sharp behind her glasses, "with this evidence of hidden assets, we have a strong case, but we need to move fast." I nodded, a newfound determination coursing through me. "What's our next step?" "We file a countersuit," Sarah explained. "We'll demand a full financial disclosure and push for an emergency hearing. Peter won't see it coming." As we strategized, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Peter. "We need to talk. Meet me at the house tonight." I showed Sarah the message. She frowned. Be careful, Hannah. He might be trying to manipulate you. I know, I replied, my jaw set. But I'm not the same woman he left behind. I can handle Peter now. That evening, I walked into our once shared home, my heart pounding, but my resolve firm. Peter was waiting in the living room, looking haggard. Hannah, he started, his voice softer than I'd heard in months. I've been thinking maybe we rushed into this divorce. Maybe we could try counseling? For a moment my heart leapt, but then I remembered the hidden assets, the lies, the other woman carrying his child. Why the sudden change of heart, Peter? He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I once found endearing. I miss you, Hannah, our life together. It's not the same with, well, you know. With Amber? I supplied, watching him flinch at the name. Your pregnant girlfriend? Peter's eyes widened. How did you? I know a lot of things now, Peter. I cut him off, including the offshore accounts and hidden properties. The color drained from his face. Hannah, I can explain. Save it, I snapped. I'm done with your explanations and your lies. You wanted a divorce? You've got one, but it's going to be on my terms now. Peter's demeanor changed instantly, his face hardening. You're bluffing. You don't have any proof. I pulled out my phone, showing him a photo of one of the documents Mr. Moore had provided. Want to bet your law license on that? For a moment, I saw fear in Peter's eyes. Then, like a cornered animal, he lashed out. You think you can threaten me? I made you, Hannah. Without me, you're nothing but a washed-up housewife. His words stung, but I refused to let him see how they affected me. Is that what you think? Well, this washed-up housewife is about to take you for everything you've got. Peter lunged forward, grabbing my arm. You can't do this to me. I won't let you ruin everything I've worked for. Fear surged through me, but I stood my ground. Let go of me, Peter. Now. Just then, the front door burst open. Kate rushed in, followed by a police officer. Hannah, are you okay? I got worried when you didn't answer my calls. Peter released me immediately, stepping back. The officer looked between us. Is everything all right here? I rubbed my arm, already feeling bruises forming. No, I said firmly. It's not. I'd like to press charges for assault. As the officer led Peter away, reading him his rights, I felt a strange mix of emotions, relief, sadness, and a grim satisfaction. Kate hugged me tightly. Oh, Hannah, I'm so sorry. Are you sure you want to go through with the charges? I nodded, watching as Peter was placed in the police car. Yes, it's time he faced consequences for his actions. That night, as I lay in bed, the events of the day replayed in my mind. Peter's attempt at reconciliation, his true colors showing when cornered, the fear I'd felt when he grabbed me. But beneath it all was a steely resolve. I'd stood up to Peter. I'd refused to be manipulated or intimidated. For the first time in years, I felt truly in control of my life. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, court hearings, divorce proceedings, rebuilding my life. But as I drifted off to sleep, I knew one thing for certain. I was ready to face whatever came next. The old Hannah was gone, and in her place was a woman who would never again let anyone underestimate or mistreat her. The courthouse loomed before me, its stone facade a silent witness to countless battles. Today it would host mine. I smoothed my skirt, took a deep breath, and walked in, Sarah Goldstein at my side. Remember, Sarah whispered, stay calm, no matter what Peter or his lawyer say. We have the upper hand. I nodded, steeling myself as we entered the courtroom. Peter was already there, looking polished in an expensive suit. Our eyes met, and I saw a flicker of surprise, perhaps at my composure, or the determination in my gaze. As the judge entered and proceedings began, I felt a surreal calm. This was it, the moment that would define my future. Peter's lawyer spoke first, painting me as a vindictive wife, making false accusations out of spite. I clenched my fists under the table, willing myself to remain stoic. Then it was Sarah's turn. She stood, her voice clear and confident. Your Honor, we have evidence that Mr. Thompson has committed fraud by hiding substantial assets. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Peter's face paled as Sarah presented the documents from Mr. Moore. His lawyer scrambled to object, but the judge overruled him. As Sarah detailed the offshore accounts and properties Peter had concealed, I watched him squirm. For the first time I saw fear in his eyes, the fear of a man whose carefully constructed world was crumbling. Then the bombshell. Furthermore, Your Honor, Sarah continued, we have evidence of Mr. Thompson's infidelity, including his relationship with a woman who is now pregnant with his child. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Peter's lawyer leaned in, whispering furiously to him. I caught fragments. Didn't tell me. Changes everything. The judge called a recess, and as we filed out, I felt lightheaded. Sarah squeezed my arm. You're doing great, Hannah. Stay strong. In the hallway, Peter cornered me. How could you do this? He hissed. You're ruining everything. I stood my ground. No, Peter. You ruined everything when you decided to betray our marriage. His eyes narrowed. You think you've won? I still have tricks up my sleeve. By the time I'm done, you'll be lucky if you get a penny. Before I could respond, a commotion erupted near the courtroom doors. A young blonde woman burst in, her pregnant belly obvious. Peter, she cried. What's going on? Why didn't you tell me about this hearing? Amber, Peter's mistress. The woman carrying his child. Our eyes met, and I saw confusion and hurt in hers. In that moment, I felt an unexpected pang of sympathy. She, too, had been deceived by Peter. Peter looked panicked, caught between his wife and his pregnant girlfriend. Amber, you shouldn't be here. Please, just go home. Go home? Amber's voice rose. I'm carrying your child, Peter. You promised we'd be together. The hallway had gone silent, all eyes on our drama. I saw pity in some faces, disgust in others. Peter, the man I'd loved for 20 years, looked small and pathetic. Suddenly, Amber turned to me. I'm so sorry, she sobbed. I didn't know. He told me you were separated, that you didn't love him anymore. The weight of it all, the lies, the betrayal, the public humiliation, crashed over me. I felt my knees buckle, but Sarah caught me, steadying me. Mrs. Thompson, the bailiff called, the judge is ready to resume. As we re-entered the courtroom, I felt as if I was walking through a fog. Peter's deceptions had hurt not just me, but this young woman too. The life I'd built, the future I'd planned, all of it was gone. But as I took my seat, facing the judge, a strange clarity washed over me. This wasn't just about the money or the assets anymore. It was about justice, about standing up for myself and every other woman who had been lied to and manipulated. I looked at Peter, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. You've lost, Peter, I said quietly. Not just the case, but everything that ever mattered. As the judge called the court to order, I sat up straight, ready to face whatever came next. The old Hannah might have crumbled under the weight of this moment, but the woman I'd become? She was ready to fight and win. The sun streamed through the windows of my new apartment, casting a warm glow on the freshly painted walls. It had been 6 months since the fateful day in court, and my life had transformed in ways I never could have imagined. I sipped my morning coffee, savoring the quiet moment before starting my day. The stillness was interrupted by a ping from my phone, a news alert. My heart skipped a beat as I read the headline, Prominent lawyer Peter Thompson disbarred for fraud and ethical violations. A mix of emotions washed over me, vindication, sadness, and finally, a sense of closure. I had won the divorce settlement, exposing Peter's hidden assets and securing my financial future. But the victory had come at a cost. The scandal had rocked our community, and Peter's career had crumbled in the aftermath. As I scrolled through the article, my phone rang. It was Kate. Hannah, have you seen the news? She asked, her voice a mix of concern and excitement. I just did, I replied, surprised by the calmness in my voice. How are you feeling about it? Kate paused. I'm more concerned about how you're feeling. Are you okay? I took a deep breath, considering her question. You know what, Kate? I really am. For the first time in years, I feel free. We chatted for a few more minutes before I had to get ready for work. Yes, work. In the months following the divorce, I had rediscovered my passion for interior design, a dream I had set aside when I married Peter. Now I was apprenticing at a local firm, learning the ropes and building a new career. As I walked to the office, I passed the coffee shop where Peter and I used to have our Sunday brunches. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of a familiar face, Amber, Peter's former mistress. Her baby bump had given way to a stroller. Our eyes met, and after a moment's hesitation, she gave me a small, sad smile. I nodded in return, feeling a surprising lack of bitterness. We had both been victims of Peter's deception, in our own ways. At the office, my colleague Sandra greeted me with a knowing look. Quite the headlines today, huh? She said, handing me a stack of fabric swatches. I nodded, focusing on the task at hand. Life has a way of balancing the scales, I replied, surprised by the wisdom in my own words. As the day progressed, I found myself reflecting on the journey of the past year. The pain of betrayal, the fear of an uncertain future, the struggle to reclaim my identity. It had all led me here, to this moment of strength and self-discovery. That evening, as I walked home, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Peter. My heart raced as I opened it. "Hannah, I know I have no right to ask, but I need help. Can we talk?" I stared at the message, memories of our life together flashing through my mind. The young, ambitious lawyer I had fallen in love with, the man who had betrayed and belittled me, the broken figure in the courtroom, watching his lies unravel. Taking a deep breath, I typed my response. "I'm sorry, Peter, but that chapter of our lives is closed. I wish you well, but I can't be the one to help you anymore." As I hit send, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The last tie to my old life had been severed. I was no longer Peter's wife, no longer the woman who would sacrifice her own needs for his ambitions. I was Hannah, strong, independent, and finally, truly free. Entering my apartment, I was greeted by the vision board I had created, filled with dreams and goals for my new life. Travel plans, design projects, even a tentative sketch for a book I hoped to write someday. Each item represented a piece of myself I was reclaiming and nurturing. As I settled onto my balcony with a glass of wine, watching the sun set over the city, I felt a profound sense of peace. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, I was excited about the journey. "Here's to new beginnings," I whispered to myself, raising my glass to the fading light. The Hannah who had started this journey would never have believed where it would lead. But the woman I had become, she was ready for anything life might bring. And that, I realized, was the greatest victory of all. The antique vase shattered at my feet, its delicate porcelain fragments scattering across the hardwood floor. I stood frozen, my hand still outstretched from where I'd knocked it off the shelf. The silence that followed was deafening. "Mom, what have you done?" Sophie's shrill voice pierced the air, her eyes wide with horror. I opened my mouth to explain, but no words came out. How could I tell them it was an accident when they were looking at me like I was a criminal? Ethan, my husband of 20 years, rushed into the room, his face contorted with anger as he surveyed the scene. "Amanda, that was my mother's prized possession. How could you?" I didn't mean to," I stammered, finally finding my voice. "I was just dusting and—" "Save it," Ethan snapped, cutting me off. "You've always been jealous of my mother's things. Admit it, you did this on purpose." I felt like I'd been slapped. "What? No, of course not. It was an accident, I swear." Sophie scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Right, Mom. Just like it was an accident when you lost Grandma's pearl necklace last month?" My heart sank. That had been a genuine mistake, but now it was being used against me. I looked from my daughter to my husband, searching for any sign of understanding in their eyes. There was none. "I think you should leave," Ethan said, his voice cold and firm. "Leave? But this is my home," I protested, feeling panic rise in my chest. "Not anymore," he replied. "I want you out by tonight. We can't trust you around valuable things anymore." I turned to Sophie, hoping for support, but she just crossed her arms and looked away. My own daughter siding with her father against me. The betrayal stung worse than any physical pain. "You can't be serious," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Where am I supposed to go?" Ethan shrugged, already turning away. "That's not my problem. Just get out of my sight." As if on cue, the doorbell rang. Ethan went to answer it, leaving me alone with Sophie. "Sophie, honey, please," I pleaded. "You know I would never do something like this on purpose." She met my gaze, her eyes hard. "Do I? You've always resented Dad's success and Grandma's wealth. Maybe you finally snapped." Before I could respond, Ethan returned with a police officer in tow. My blood ran cold. "Officer, this is my wife," Ethan said, his voice dripping with false concern. "She's been acting erratically lately, destroying family heirlooms. We're worried about her mental state." The officer looked at me sympathetically. "Ma'am, is there someone we can call for you? Somewhere you can stay tonight?" I felt like I was in a nightmare. How had things spiraled so quickly? Just this morning, we'd been a normal family having breakfast together. Now, I was being treated like a criminal in my own home. I can call my sister," I managed to say, my voice shaking. As I fumbled for my phone, I caught sight of Ethan and Sophie exchanging a look. There was something in their eyes, something that made me wonder if this was more than just a misunderstanding. The officer escorted me to my room to pack a bag. As I threw clothes haphazardly into a suitcase, my mind raced. What was really going on here? Why were Ethan and Sophie so quick to turn on me? I paused, my hand on a framed photo of the three of us from happier times. Something wasn't right, and I was determined to find out what it was. They might think they've won, kicking me out like this, but they had no idea what I was capable of. As I walked out of the house I'd called home for 2 decades, I made a silent vow. I would uncover the truth, clear my name, and make them regret ever doubting me. This wasn't the end, it was just the beginning. I spent a restless night on Abby's couch, my mind racing with questions and doubts. The morning light had barely crept through the curtains when my phone buzzed. It was Sophie. "Mom, you need to come to Grandma's house, now." My heart leaped into my throat. "Is everything okay?" "Just come," she snapped before hanging up. I arrived at my mother-in-law's sprawling Victorian home within the hour, my stomach in knots. Ethan's car was already in the driveway. As I approached the front door, I heard raised voices inside. "I'm telling you, Mother, it was Amanda." Ethan's voice carried through the open window. "She's been eyeing your valuables for years." I froze, my hand on the doorknob. What was he doing? "But dear, Amanda's always been so kind," his mother Margaret replied. Her voice was frail, confused. "Are you sure?" "Of course I'm sure," Ethan insisted. "Why do you think she's not here now?" "She's probably pawning your things as we speak." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Anger surged through me as I burst through the door. "How dare you?" Ethan spun around, his face a mask of false concern. "Amanda, what are you doing here?" "Sophie called me," I said, glaring at him. "And I'm glad she did. What lies are you feeding your mother?" Margaret looked between us, her eyes clouded with confusion. "Ethan, you said Amanda stole from me?" "Because she did, Mother," Ethan said smoothly. "Remember the missing pearl necklace and now the vase?" "That's not true," I protested. "Margaret, you know me. I would never." "Oh, Amanda," Margaret interrupted, her voice trembling. "How could you, after all these years?" My heart shattered. I turned to Sophie, who stood silently in the corner. "Sophie, please, tell your grandmother the truth." But Sophie just looked away, avoiding my gaze. In that moment, I realized how deep Ethan's manipulation ran. He had turned not just my daughter against me, but his own mother, too. "I think you should leave," Ethan said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "You're upsetting Mother." I stood my ground. "I'm not going anywhere until we sort this out. Margaret, please try to remember. I've always respected your things. It's Ethan who—" "Enough!" Ethan shouted, his calm facade cracking. "Mother doesn't need this stress. Sophie, take Grandma upstairs." As Sophie led a bewildered Margaret away, I turned on Ethan. "What game are you playing?" His eyes narrowed. "Game? I'm protecting my family from a thief." "We both know that's not true," I hissed. "Why are you doing this? What are you hiding?" For a split second I saw fear flicker in Ethan's eyes, but it was quickly replaced by cold anger. "You're delusional, Amanda. Maybe you need professional help." "The only help I need is a good lawyer," I retorted. "You won't get away with this." Ethan laughed, a cruel sound that sent chills down my spine. "Get away with what? Telling the truth? Face it, Amanda. No one will believe you over me. I'm the successful businessman. You're just a housewife with a history of accidents around valuable antiques." His words hit me like a physical blow. I realized then how carefully he had orchestrated this, how long he must have been planning it. But why? As I turned to leave, I caught sight of a letter on Margaret's desk. The logo at the top made my blood run cold. It was from the bank that handled Ethan's business accounts. Suddenly, pieces started falling into place. The missing antiques, Ethan's increasingly lavish spending, his desperation to discredit me. Was he in financial trouble? I walked out of the house, my mind whirling. Ethan thought he had won, but he had no idea who he was dealing with. I might be down, but I was far from out. It was time to start digging, to uncover what Ethan was really hiding. As I drove away, I made a silent vow. I would expose Ethan's lies, clear my name, and reclaim my life. The game was on, and I intended to win. I sat at Abby's kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee and mulling over the events of the past few days. My sister bustled around, preparing breakfast and shooting concerned glances my way. "Amanda, You need to eat something, she said, sliding a plate of toast in front of me. I shook my head. I can't. I keep thinking about Sophie. How could she turn on me like this? Abby sighed, taking the seat across from me. Honey, you've been blind to this for years. Ethan's been poisoning Sophie against you since she was little. What are you talking about? I asked, my defenses rising. Think about it, Abby pressed. Who always gave in to her every whim? Who never made her face consequences? Ethan's turned that girl into a spoiled princess, and you've let it happen. Her words stung, but deep down I knew she was right. I thought back to all the times Ethan had undermined my parenting, always playing the fun dad while I was left to be the disciplinarian. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. Dad's taking me to Paris for the weekend. Thought you should know. I showed the message to Abby, my hands shaking. See? He's buying her loyalty with trips and gifts. Abby's eyes narrowed. Amanda, don't you think it's odd that Ethan's splurging on a Paris trip right after accusing you of theft? Where's this money coming from? Before I could respond, there was a knock at the door. Abby went to answer it, and I heard hushed voices in the hallway. A moment later, she returned with a stern-faced woman in a suit. Mrs. Thompson? The woman asked. I'm Linda Carson from Child Protective Services. We need to talk about your daughter, Sophie. My heart plummeted. What? Why? Linda sat down, her expression grave. We've received reports of potential emotional abuse and neglect. Given the recent accusations against you, we need to assess Sophie's living situation. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. This is ridiculous. I've never abused Sophie. Ethan's the one who. Mrs. Thompson, Linda interrupted, please understand that we're just doing our job. We'll be conducting interviews with Sophie, your husband, and other family members. As Linda continued explaining the process, my mind raced. This had Ethan written all over it. He was using the system against me, painting me as an unfit mother. Can I at least talk to Sophie? I asked, my voice cracking. Linda shook her head. I'm afraid that's not possible right now. We need to conduct our initial interviews without any potential influence. After Linda left, I collapsed into Abby's arms, sobbing. He's taking everything from me, Abby. My home, my daughter, my reputation. Abby held me tight, her voice fierce. Listen to me, Amanda. Ethan might think he's won, but he's underestimated you. It's time to fight back. I pulled away, wiping my eyes. How? He holds all the cards. Not all of them, Abby said, a glint in her eye. Remember that letter you saw at Margaret's house? From the bank? I think it's time we did some digging into Ethan's finances. A spark of hope ignited in my chest. You're right. If Ethan's hiding something, that's where we'll find it. As we started planning our next move, my phone buzzed again. Another text from Sophie. Mom, I'm sorry. I don't know what to believe anymore. I stared at the message, a mix of emotions swirling inside me. Maybe all wasn't lost with Sophie after all. But I knew one thing for certain. I had to act fast. Ethan was playing a dangerous game, and it was time I learned the rules. I looked up at Abby, a new determination in my eyes. Let's do this. It's time to uncover what Ethan's really hiding and save our family before it's too late. The familiar creak of the porch steps brought a rush of memories as I approached my childhood home. It had been years since I'd last visited, but desperate times called for desperate measures. My mother rose, opened the door before I could knock, her weathered face a mix of concern and love. Amanda, sweetheart, she said, pulling me into a tight embrace. Abby called. I've been worried sick. I melted into her arms, feeling like a little girl again. Oh, Mom, everything's falling apart. She ushered me inside, the scent of freshly baked cookies enveloping me like a warm blanket. As we sat at the kitchen table, I poured out the whole sordid story. Ethan's accusations, Sophie's betrayal, the CPS investigation. Mom listened intently, her brow furrowing with each new revelation. That no-good son-in-law of mine, she muttered when I finished. I always knew he was trouble. I sighed, cradling a mug of tea in my hands. I should have seen it coming. How could I have been so blind? Mom reached across the table, clasping my hand. Now you listen here, Amanda. You are not to blame for Ethan's deceit, but it's high time you stood up for yourself. But how? I asked, feeling utterly defeated. He's taken everything from me, my home, my daughter, my reputation. A steely glint appeared in Mom's eyes. He hasn't taken your spirit, has he? You're a fighter, Amanda. Always have been. Remember when you were 10, and those bullies stole your bike? I couldn't help but smile at the memory. I tracked them down and demanded it back. Exactly, Mom nodded. You didn't give up then, and you're not giving up now. Ethan might think he's won, but he doesn't know who he's dealing with. As we talked, a plan began to form. Mom suggested I reach out to her old friend, a retired detective named Frank, who might be able to help investigate Ethan's finances. She also reminded me of the importance of documenting everything. Every interaction, every accusation, every suspicious move Ethan made. Knowledge is power, sweetheart, she said. The more you know, the stronger your position. Just then my phone buzzed. It was a text from Sophie. Mom, I'm scared. Dad's acting weird. Can we talk? My heart raced. This could be my chance to reconnect with my daughter to help her see the truth. But what if it was a trap? What should I do, Mom? I asked, showing her the message. She squeezed my hand. Trust your instincts, Amanda. You know your daughter. If she's reaching out, there must be a reason. Taking a deep breath, I typed out a reply. Of course, sweetie. Name the time and place. As I hit send, a wave of determination washed over me. Mom was right. I was a fighter. And it was time to show Ethan exactly what I was made of. I need to go back, I said, standing up. I can't hide out here while Ethan destroys everything we've built. Mom nodded, a proud smile on her face. That's my girl. But remember, you're not alone in this fight. Your family has your back. As I packed my bags, Mom's words of wisdom echoed in my mind. Adversity doesn't build character, Amanda. It reveals it. And you, my dear, have character in spades. Hugging her goodbye, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Ethan might have landed the first punch, but I was far from knocked out. It was time to gather evidence, reconnect with Sophie, and expose Ethan's lies. Driving away from my childhood home, I made a solemn vow. I would reclaim my life, clear my name, and show Sophie the truth about her father. The road ahead would be tough, but I was tougher. Ethan had no idea what was coming his way. The familiar jingle of the bell above the door of Ethan's Antiques sent a chill down my spine. I'd entered this shop countless times before, but never like this, a woman on a mission, determined to uncover the truth. Amanda? Marge, Ethan's longtime assistant, looked up from the counter, surprise etched on her face. I thought you were away. I forced a smile. Just stopping by to pick up some personal items, Marge. Is Ethan around? She shook her head. He's at an auction in Boston. Won't be back till tomorrow. Perfect. I made my way to the back office, my heart pounding. I had maybe an hour before Marge's curiosity got the better of her. Sitting at Ethan's desk, I booted up his computer. Thank God he'd never changed his password. Our wedding anniversary of all things. As I dug through the financial records, a pattern emerged. Large sums of money moving in and out of accounts I'd never seen before. Sales records for items I knew we'd never had in stock. And then I saw it. A transaction for an antique vase, matching the description of his mother's prized possession, sold to a private collector for an astronomical sum. My hands shook as I scribbled down account numbers and dates. This was it. Proof of Ethan's deception. But as I delved deeper, I realized it was just the tip of the iceberg. The business was hemorrhaging money, and Ethan was desperately trying to cover it up. Suddenly, the office door swung open. I looked up, expecting to see Marge, but instead found myself face to face with Sophie. Mom? Her eyes widened in shock. What are you doing here? I scrambled to close the files on the computer. Sophie, I can explain. Are you stealing from Dad? She accused, her voice rising. Is that why you're sneaking around? No, sweetie. It's not what you think, I pleaded, reaching for her. I'm trying to uncover the truth. Your father, he's been... Stop it, Sophie shouted, backing away. I don't want to hear your lies. I'm calling Dad. As she pulled out her phone, panic surged through me. If Ethan found out I'd been here, all my efforts would be for nothing. In a split-second decision, I grabbed Sophie's arm. Listen to me, I said urgently. Your father is not who you think he is. He's been lying to all of us, including your grandmother. I can prove it, but I need you to trust me. Sophie hesitated, her finger hovering over Ethan's number. Why should I believe you? Because I'm your mother, I said softly. And despite everything that's happened, I love you more than anything in this world. I would never lie to you, Sophie. Not about this. For a moment, we stood in tense silence. Then, slowly, Sophie lowered her phone. You have 5 minutes to explain. Relief washed over me. I quickly showed her the financial records, explaining the discrepancies and the suspicious transactions. As understanding dawned on her face, I saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes. "But why would Dad do this?" she asked, her voice small. "I don't know, sweetheart," I admitted, "but I intend to find out. Will you help me?" Sophie bit her lip, conflict clear on her face. Then, with a determined nod, she said, "What do you need me to do?" In that moment, I felt a surge of hope. My daughter was back on my side. But I knew we weren't out of the woods yet. Ethan would return soon, and when he did, all hell would break loose. As we hurriedly copied files and gathered evidence, I steeled myself for the confrontation to come. The stakes had never been higher. Not just for me, but for Sophie and the entire family. One thing was certain. There was no turning back now. The truth would come out, no matter the cost. My heart raced as I approached the sprawling mansion. This was it. The home of Ethan's wealthiest client, Richard Holloway. Sophie had overheard Ethan mentioning a special delivery here, and my gut told me this was where we'd find the missing antique. "Are you sure about this, Mom?" Sophie whispered beside me, her face pale with anxiety. I squeezed her hand. "We have to know the truth, sweetheart, no matter what." Taking a deep breath, I rang the doorbell. A maid answered, eyeing us suspiciously. "We're here to see Mr. Holloway," I said, mustering all the confidence I could. "It's about an antique he recently acquired." Moments later, we were ushered into an opulent study. Richard Holloway, a distinguished man in his 60s, greeted us warmly. "Ah, you must be from Ethan's Antiques," he said, smiling. I was expecting someone to check on the vase. Magnificent piece, isn't it? My breath caught in my throat as I spotted it. Margaret's prized antique vase, sitting proudly on a pedestal by the window. "Actually, Mr. Holloway," I began, my voice shaking slightly, "I'm Amanda Thompson, Ethan's wife. And this vase, it belongs to my mother-in-law." Richard's smile faltered. "I'm afraid there must be some mistake. I purchased this vase legitimately from your husband's shop." "No mistake," Sophie interjected, her voice stronger than I expected. "That's my grandmother's vase. Dad had no right to sell it." As Richard's confusion grew, I quickly explained the situation, Ethan's accusations, the family turmoil, and our suspicions about the business's finances. "Good Lord," Richard muttered, sinking into his chair. "I had no idea. I've been doing business with Ethan for years. This is troubling." Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Abby. "Ethan's on his way to Holloway's. He knows you're there." Panic surged through me. "Mr. Holloway, I hate to ask this, but could you please not mention our visit to my husband? We need time to gather more evidence." Richard nodded gravely. "Of course, this is a serious matter. I'll cooperate fully with any investigation." As we hurried out, I saw Ethan's car turning into the driveway. "Quick, Sophie," I hissed, pulling her behind a hedge. We watched as Ethan strode up to the house, his face a mask of barely contained fury. Through the open study window, we could hear snippets of his conversation with Richard. Misunderstanding, my wife is unstable, custody battle. My blood boiled at Ethan's lies, but Sophie's grip on my arm tightened. "Not yet, Mom," she whispered. "We need more proof." She was right, of course, but hearing Ethan spin his web of deceit made me realize just how far he was willing to go to protect himself. As we snuck away, I knew we were racing against time. Ethan would soon realize we'd been there, and he'd stop at nothing to discredit us. "What now?" Sophie asked as we drove away, her voice trembling. I gripped the steering wheel, my mind racing. "We need to move fast. We'll go to the police, show them the financial records, tell them about the vase." Suddenly, my phone rang. It was Margaret, Ethan's mother. "Amanda?" Her frail voice quavered. "Ethan says you've stolen from me. He wants to put me in a home. Please, what's going on?" My heart sank. Ethan was making his move, isolating Margaret to keep her quiet. "Don't worry," I assured her, though fear gnawed at my insides. "I'm coming to get you. Everything will be all right." As I ended the call, I realized the true extent of Ethan's manipulation. He wasn't just trying to frame me. He was systematically destroying every relationship I had, every support system I could turn to. I looked at Sophie, saw the fear and determination in her eyes, and made a decision. "Change of plans," I said, making a sharp U-turn. "We're getting your grandmother. It's time to end this, once and for all." As we raced towards Margaret's house, I knew we were hurtling towards a confrontation that would change everything. But I was done being a victim. It was time to fight back, to reclaim my life and protect my family. Whatever Ethan had planned, he was about to learn that he'd underestimated me for the last time. We burst through the door of Margaret's house, finding her in the living room, surrounded by half-packed boxes. Her eyes, wide with confusion and fear, met mine. "Amanda? Sophie? What's happening?" she asked, her voice trembling. "We're getting you out of here, Margaret," I said, rushing to her side. "Ethan's been lying to all of us." Sophie started gathering Margaret's essentials while I quickly explained the situation. Margaret's face crumpled as the truth sank in. "My own son, how could he?" she whispered. Just then, we heard the screech of tires outside. Ethan had arrived. "Quick, out the back," I urged, helping Margaret to her feet. We were halfway across the backyard when Ethan's voice boomed behind us. "Stop right there!" We turned to face him, his face contorted with rage. "What do you think you're doing, Amanda? Kidnapping my mother now?" "Enough, Ethan," I shouted, my fear transforming into anger. "We know everything. The embezzlement, selling your mother's antiques, framing me. It's over." Ethan's eyes darted between us, calculating his next move. "You have no proof," he sneered. "Who do you think they'll believe? The respected businessman or the unstable wife?" "They'll believe the truth," Sophie interjected, stepping forward. "I've seen the evidence, Dad. How could you do this to us, to Grandma?" For a moment, Ethan's mask slipped, revealing a flicker of shame, but it quickly hardened into defiance. "You don't understand. The business was failing. I had to do something." "By stealing from your own mother?" Margaret's voice was quiet but firm. "By destroying your family?" Ethan's composure cracked. "I never meant for it to go this far. The first sale was just to cover a small debt, but then it spiraled. I couldn't stop." As Ethan's confession poured out, I felt a mix of vindication and sorrow. This man I'd loved, the father of my child, had betrayed us all so completely. "It's not too late to make this right, Ethan," I said, softening my tone. "Turn yourself in. We can work through this as a family." For a moment, hope flickered in his eyes. Then, without warning, he lunged forward, grabbing Margaret's arm. "No, I won't let you ruin everything I've built." "Let her go, Ethan!" I screamed, fear gripping my heart as Margaret stumbled. Sophie rushed to her grandmother's aid, while I faced off against my husband. In his eyes, I saw desperation, the cornered look of a man with nothing left to lose. "Think about what you're doing," I pleaded, inching closer. "This isn't you, Ethan. Remember the man I fell in love with, the father Sophie adores. He's still in there somewhere." Ethan's grip on Margaret loosened slightly. I don't know how to fix this," he admitted, his voice breaking. Just then, police sirens wailed in the distance. Someone, probably a neighbor, had called them. "It's over, Dad," Sophie said gently, supporting Margaret. "Please don't make this worse." As the police cars pulled up, Ethan's shoulders sagged in defeat. He released Margaret and slumped to the ground, burying his face in his hands. While the officers took Ethan into custody, I held Margaret and Sophie close. We'd won, but the victory felt hollow. Our family was irrevocably changed. As we watched Ethan being driven away, Sophie turned to me, tears in her eyes. "What happens now, Mom?" I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of uncertainty pressing down on us. "I don't know, sweetheart, but we'll face it together, one day at a time." The road ahead would be challenging, filled with legal battles, emotional healing, and rebuilding trust. But as I stood there with my daughter and mother-in-law, I felt a glimmer of hope. We'd survived the worst of the storm. Now it was time to pick up the pieces and start anew. 6 months after Ethan's arrest, I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my blazer. Today was the final day of his trial, and I was determined to face it with the strength I'd discovered within myself. "Mom?" Sophie's voice called from downstairs. "Are you ready?" I took a deep breath. "Coming, sweetie." As we drove to the courthouse, I couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed. The initial shock of Ethan's betrayal had given way to a steely resolve. Sophie, once Daddy's little girl, had matured beyond her years, standing by my side through it all. The courtroom was packed as we entered. I caught sight of Margaret, frail but determined, sitting with my sister Abby. As the judge called the court to order, I felt Sophie's hand slip into mine. Ethan's eyes met mine as he was led in. Gone was the arrogant businessman I'd known. In his place sat a broken man, the weight of his actions evident in the slump of his shoulders. As the verdict was read, guilty on all counts, a collective sigh seemed to ripple through the room. It was over. Finally, truly over. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us. "Mrs. Thompson, how do you feel about the verdict?" one shouted. I paused, considering my words carefully. Today isn't about winning or losing. It's about truth and accountability. My family has been through hell, but we're survivors. We'll heal, and we'll move forward. Later that evening, as Sophie, Margaret, Abby, and I sat around the dinner table in our new home, a sense of peace settled over me. It wasn't perfect. Margaret still had moments of confusion, and Sophie was in therapy to work through her trust issues. But we were together, supporting each other. "I have something for you," Margaret said, her eyes twinkling as she handed me a small box. Inside was a delicate silver locket. "It's beautiful," I gasped. "Open it," she urged. I did, and tiny photograph inside. Me, Sophie, and Margaret, taken just last week. On the other side was engraved, "Family is love, not blood." Tears welled in my eyes as I looked at these three incredible women. My daughter, who'd shown such courage in facing the truth about her father. My sister, who'd stood by me when I had nothing. And Margaret, who'd chosen to embrace me as a daughter, despite everything. "I know it's been a hard road," Margaret said, her voice quavering slightly. "But I want you to know, Amanda, that you've shown us all what true strength looks like. You didn't just survive, you helped us all find a way forward." Sophie nodded, squeezing my hand. "Mom, I'm so sorry for doubting you. You've taught me what real integrity means." "Oh, sweetie," I pulled her close. "We've all learned so much, and we'll keep learning together." As the evening wore on, filled with laughter and shared memories, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. The path ahead wasn't clear. We still had financial challenges to face and emotional scars to heal, but I knew we'd face it as a family. Later, as I stood on the back porch, gazing at the stars, Abby joined me. "Penny for your thoughts, sis?" I smiled, fingering the locket around my neck. "I was just thinking, for the first time in a long time, I'm excited about the future. It's like I can breathe again." Abby nudged my shoulder. "You know, when this all started, I was so worried about you. But watching you stand up for yourself, fight for the truth, I've never been prouder to call you my sister." As we hugged, I realized that this journey, painful as it had been, had given me something precious, a deeper understanding of my own strength and the unbreakable bonds of true family. The road ahead would have its challenges, but I was ready to face them. With Sophie, Margaret, and Abby by my side, I knew that whatever life threw our way, we'd face it together, stronger, wiser, and filled with love. As I closed the porch door and rejoined my family inside, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. This wasn't the end of our story. It was just the beginning of a new chapter, and I couldn't wait to see what the future held for us all. I stared at the phone in my hand, my knuckles white from gripping it too tightly. Ethan's voice echoed in my ears, but I couldn't make sense of his words. My husband of 15 years, the father of our daughter, was telling me something that shook the very foundation of our life together. "Anna, are you still there?" Ethan's voice crackled through the speaker. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to respond. "Yes, I'm here. I can't believe what you're saying. Elise is pregnant?" "Yes, she is, and she needs our support now more than ever." I closed my eyes, trying to process this information. Elise, Ethan's younger sister, had always been a free spirit, but this was beyond anything I could have imagined. "Who's the father?" I asked, dreading the answer. There was a pause on the other end of the line. She doesn't want to say, but that's not important right now. What matters is that we're there for her." I felt a knot forming in my stomach. "Ethan, how can you say that's not important? She's married, for heaven's sake. What about Robert?" "Robert left her," Ethan said, his voice tight with anger. "He couldn't handle it. But I won't abandon my sister, Anna. I can't." The knot in my stomach tightened. There was something in Ethan's voice, a fierce protectiveness that went beyond brotherly concern. It made me uneasy. "When are you coming home?" I asked, glancing at the clock. It was almost time to pick up Mia from school. "I don't know," Ethan replied. "Elise needs me here. I might stay a few days." I bit back a sharp retort. "Ethan, we need you too. Mia has her dance recital this weekend, remember?" There was a long pause. "I'm sorry, Anna. I'll try to make it, but I can't promise anything. Elise is in a delicate state right now." I felt a surge of anger and hurt. And what about your daughter? Isn't she important too? Of course she is, Ethan snapped. But this is different. Elise is all alone. She has you, I muttered, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. Anna, please try to understand. I'll be home as soon as I can. The line went dead before I could respond. I stared at the phone, a mixture of emotions swirling inside me, concern for Elise, anger at Ethan, and a growing sense of unease about the whole situation. The sound of the front door opening startled me out of my thoughts. Mom? I'm home! Mia's cheerful voice called out. I quickly composed myself, pushing my worries aside. In the kitchen, sweetie? Mia bounced in, her backpack slung over one shoulder. At 12, she was the spitting image of Ethan, with his dark hair and bright blue eyes. Where's Dad? She asked, looking around. I forced a smile. He had to go help Aunt Elise with something. He'll be home in a few days. Mia's face fell. But my recital. I know, honey, I said, pulling her into a hug. He'll try his best to make it. As I held my daughter, I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted in our family. Ethan's reaction to Elise's pregnancy, his eagerness to drop everything for her, it all felt wrong somehow. I pulled back, looking into Mia's eyes. How about we practice your routine one more time before dinner? Mia's face lit up. Really? You have time? For you? Always, I said, meaning every word. As we moved to the living room, clearing space for Mia to dance, I pushed my worries to the back of my mind. But they lingered there. A shadow over what should have been a normal evening at home. Whatever was going on with Ethan and Elise, I had a sinking feeling that our lives were about to change dramatically. And not for the better. The days after Ethan's phone call blurred together in a haze of forced normalcy and mounting tension. I tried to keep things steady for Mia's sake, but every time my phone buzzed, I felt my stomach clench. It was a week before Ethan finally came home. I was in the kitchen when I heard the front door open. Daddy! Mia's excited shriek echoed through the house. I wiped my hands on a dish towel, steeling myself for the confrontation I'd been rehearsing all week. But when I walked into the living room, the words died in my throat. Ethan looked different. Haggard, with dark circles under his eyes, but there was an unsettling intensity in his gaze as he hugged Mia. Hey, sweetie, he said, his voice rough. I missed you. I missed you too, Dad, Mia replied, beaming. Did you see my recital video? Mom recorded it for you. A flicker of guilt crossed Ethan's face. I'm sorry I missed it, honey. I'll watch it soon, I promise. I cleared my throat. Mia, why don't you go finish your homework? I need to talk to your father. Once Mia was upstairs, I turned to Ethan. How's Elise? He ran a hand through his hair. She's managing. The pregnancy's been hard on her. And how are you managing? I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Ethan's eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? It means you've been gone for a week, Ethan. You missed your daughter's recital. You've barely called. I told you Elise needed me, he snapped. She's going through a difficult time. And we're not? I shot back. Do you have any idea how hard it's been trying to explain to Mia why her father wasn't here? Ethan's face softened. I'm sorry, Anna. I know it's been tough, but Elise, she's all alone. She needs support. What about Robert? I asked. Has he really just abandoned her and their unborn child? A strange look passed over Ethan's face. Robert's out of the picture. For good. Something in his tone made me pause. Ethan, what aren't you telling me? He looked away. Nothing. It's complicated, that's all. I stepped closer, forcing him to meet my eyes. No, there's more to this. I can tell what's really going on with Elise. Ethan's jaw clenched. Drop it, Anna. It's family business. I am your family, I exclaimed, my voice rising. Or have you forgotten that? Of course not, he said, but his eyes slid away from mine. Look, I'm tired. Can we talk about this later? Before I could respond, Mia's voice called down from upstairs. Mom? Dad? Is everything okay? I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to steady. Everything's fine, sweetie. Just grown-up talk. Ethan used the interruption to retreat. I'm going to take a shower, he muttered, heading for the stairs. I watched him go, a cold feeling settling in my chest. This wasn't just about Elise's pregnancy. There was something more, something Ethan wasn't telling me. That night, as we lay in bed, the silence between us felt like a chasm. I turned to face Ethan's back, watching the rise and fall of his breathing. Ethan, I whispered, what's happening to us? He didn't respond for so long I thought he'd fallen asleep. Then, so quietly I almost missed it, he murmured. I don't know, Anna. I just don't know. I rolled onto my back, staring at the ceiling. The man lying next to me suddenly felt like a stranger. The life we'd built together, the love we'd shared, it all seemed to be slipping away, and I didn't know how to stop it. As I drifted off into an uneasy sleep, one thought kept circling in my mind. Whatever was going on with Elise, it was tearing my family apart, and I was determined to find out why, no matter the cost. The shrill cry of a newborn pierced the air as I stood in the hospital corridor, my hands clenched at my sides. Ethan burst out of the delivery room, his face flushed with excitement. It's a boy, he exclaimed, grabbing my shoulders. Owen's here, Anna. He's perfect. I forced a smile, trying to match his enthusiasm. That's wonderful, Ethan. How's Elise? She's doing great, he said, his eyes shining. Come on, you have to see him. As we entered the room, I saw Elise cradling a tiny bundle. She looked up, her face glowing despite the exhaustion evident in her eyes. Anna, meet your nephew. I approached the bed, peering down at the infant. My heart softened at the sight of his scrunched-up face. He's beautiful, Elise, I said softly. Ethan moved to the other side of the bed, his hand resting on Elise's shoulder. You did amazing, sis, he murmured. Something in his tone made me look up sharply. The tenderness in Ethan's eyes as he gazed at Elise and Owen sent a chill down my spine. Where's Mia? Elise asked, breaking the moment. She's with my parents, I replied. We thought it best not to bring her to the hospital. Ethan frowned. She should be here to meet her cousin. It's late, Ethan, I said, trying to keep my voice even. She has school tomorrow. He waved dismissively. This is more important. I'll go pick her up. No, I said firmly. She needs her sleep. We can bring her tomorrow. Ethan's eyes flashed with anger. But before he could respond, a nurse entered to check on Elise and Owen. As weeks passed, Ethan's devotion to Elise and Owen only intensified. He was constantly at their house helping with feedings, diaper changes, and midnight wake-ups. Meanwhile, our own home life suffered. One evening, I found Mia sitting alone at the dinner table, pushing food around her plate. Sweetie, what's wrong? I asked, sitting beside her. She looked up, her eyes brimming with tears. Why doesn't Dad want to be with us anymore? My heart shattered. I pulled her into a tight hug. Oh, honey, your dad loves us very much. He's trying to help Aunt Elise right now. But why does he have to help her all the time? Mia sniffled. Can't someone else do it? I had no answer for her. The truth was, I'd been asking myself the same question. Later that night, I confronted Ethan as he came home late again. This has to stop, Ethan, I said, my voice trembling with suppressed anger. Mia thinks you don't want to be with us anymore? Ethan's face hardened. That's ridiculous. Of course I want to be with you, but Elise needs me right now. And we don't, I shot back. When was the last time you had dinner with us? Or helped Mia with her homework? I'm doing the best I can, Anna, he snapped. Elise is a single mother. She needs support. And what about your own family? I asked, my voice rising. We need you too, Ethan. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. You don't understand. Owen, he needs a father figure. I stared at him, a cold realization settling in my gut. And you think that should be you? Ethan's silence was deafening. Ethan, I said slowly, what exactly is your relationship with Elise? His head snapped up, eyes blazing. What are you implying? I don't know, I said, my voice shaking. But something isn't right here. The way you look at her, the way you prioritize them over us, it's not normal, Ethan. You're being paranoid, he spat. Elise is my sister, Owen is my nephew, that's all. But as he stormed out of the room, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story. Something dark and twisted that threatened to tear our family apart. I sank onto the couch, my mind reeling. Whatever was going on between Ethan and Elise, one thing was clear. I needed to protect Mia. And to do that, I might have to be prepared to fight for my family in ways I never imagined. I stared at the elaborate birthday cake on the kitchen counter, the number 13 spelled out in pink frosting. Mia's excitement had been building for weeks, and I'd promised her the best birthday party ever. But as I glanced at the clock, my heart sank. Ethan was late. Again. The doorbell rang, and I plastered on a smile as I went to greet Mia's friends. Soon the house was filled with the chatter and laughter of teenage girls. Mia kept glancing at the door, her smile faltering each time it wasn't her father walking through. "Mom," she whispered during a lull in the party games. "Where's Dad?" I squeezed her shoulder. "I'm sure he's on his way, sweetie. You know how traffic can be." But as the hours ticked by, my reassurances rang hollow. When it was time to cut the cake, Mia's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Let's wait just a few more minutes," she pleaded. I nodded, my own anger building. I stepped into the hallway and dialed Ethan's number for the 10th time. To my surprise, he picked up. "Anna, I can't talk right now," he said, his voice hushed and urgent. "Ethan, where are you?" I hissed. "Mia's party started hours ago." I know. I'm sorry. There was an emergency with Owen." "An emergency?" I interrupted. "Is he okay?" There was a pause. "He's fine now. Just a little fever. But Elise was panicking and I had to." "Had to what, Ethan?" I snapped. "Miss your daughter's 13th birthday for a fever? Couldn't Elise handle it on her own?" "You don't understand," he said, frustration evident in his voice. "Elise needs me." "And Mia doesn't." I was nearly shouting now. "Get your priorities straight, Ethan. Your daughter is waiting for you." I hung up before he could respond, taking a deep breath to compose myself before returning to the party. Mia's face fell when she saw me return alone. "He's not coming, is he?" I pulled her into a hug, feeling her body shake with silent sobs. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. But we're not going to let that ruin your day, okay? Let's cut that cake." The party continued, but the joy had been sucked out of it. As the last guest left, Mia retreated to her room without a word. I was clearing up when Ethan finally came home, looking haggard and guilty. "Where's Mia?" he asked, his eyes darting around the room. "In her room," I said coldly. "Crying, probably." "Nice of you to show up." Ethan's face crumpled. "Anna, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." "Save it," I cut him off. "I'm not the one you need to apologize to." He nodded and headed upstairs. I followed, lingering in the hallway as he knocked on Mia's door. "Mia? Sweetheart, can I come in?" There was no response. Ethan opened the door slowly and I heard Mia's muffled sobs. "Oh, honey," Ethan said, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry." "Why weren't you here?" Mia's voice was small and hurt. Don't you care about me anymore?" "Of course I do," Ethan exclaimed. "You're my little girl. I love you more than anything." "Then why are you always with Aunt Elise and Owen?" Mia asked. "Don't we matter anymore?" There was a long pause. When Ethan spoke again, his voice was strained. "It's complicated, sweetheart. Aunt Elise and Owen, they need me right now." "And we don't." Mia's voice rose. "I needed you today, Dad, and you weren't here." I couldn't take it anymore. I stepped into the room, my eyes locking with Ethan's. "I think you should go," I said quietly. Ethan looked between Mia and me, desperation in his eyes. "Anna, please." "No," I said firmly. "You've made your choice, Ethan. Now you need to live with it." As Ethan left, his shoulders slumped in defeat. I sat on the bed and pulled Mia close. She clung to me, her tears soaking my shirt. In that moment, I knew things would never be the same. The life we'd built was crumbling, and I had to decide how to protect what mattered most, my daughter. The tension in our house had become unbearable since Mia's birthday disaster. Ethan was spending more time than ever at Elise's, and when he was home, the silence between us was deafening. I'd reached my breaking point. One evening, as Ethan was heading out yet again, I blocked the door. "We need to talk," I said firmly. He sighed, checking his watch. "Can it wait? Elise is expecting me." "No, it can't," I snapped. "Sit down, Ethan. Now." Reluctantly, he followed me to the living room. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation I'd been avoiding for months. "What's really going on between you and Elise?" I asked bluntly. Ethan's face hardened. "We've been through this, Anna. She's my sister. I'm helping her with Owen." "It's more than that," I pressed. "The way you look at her, the way you prioritize them over us, it's not normal, Ethan." He stood up abruptly. "You're being ridiculous. Is this why you stopped me to accuse me of what exactly?" I met his gaze unflinchingly. "I don't know. You tell me. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're in love with your sister." The color drained from Ethan's face. For a moment, he looked like I'd slapped him. Then his expression twisted into something I'd never seen before. A mix of anger, guilt, and relief. "You have no idea what you're talking about," he hissed. "Then explain it to me," I shouted, my composure finally cracking. "Because I'm losing my husband. Mia's losing her father, and I don't understand why." Ethan paced the room, running his hands through his hair. It's complicated, Anna. Elise and I, we have a bond you couldn't possibly understand. Try me, I said, my voice cold. He stopped, turning to face me. Elise and I, we've always been close. Closer than most siblings. When she got pregnant, when Robert left her, I couldn't abandon her. I couldn't let her face that alone. But Owen isn't just your nephew, is he? I whispered, the horrible realization dawning on me. Ethan's silence was all the confirmation I needed. I felt the room spin, nausea rising in my throat. How long? I managed to choke out. Anna, please. How long, Ethan? I demanded. He slumped onto the couch, defeated. Years. Since we were teenagers. It just happened. I stumbled back, gripping the wall for support. And Owen? Ethan nodded, unable to meet my eyes. The betrayal, the lies, the years of deception. It all came crashing down on me. I felt like I was drowning, gasping for air in a world that no longer made sense. Does Mia know? I asked, my voice barely audible. God, no, Ethan said quickly. We never wanted to hurt her, or you. We tried to end it so many times, but you couldn't, I finished for him. And now there's a child. Ethan looked up, his eyes pleading. I know it's wrong, I know it's messed up, but I love them, Anna. I can't abandon them now. In that moment, looking at the man I thought I knew, I felt something inside me harden. The shock and pain gave way to a cold, clear purpose. Get out, I said quietly. What? Get out of this house, I repeated, my voice gaining strength. Pack your things and leave. Anna, please, we can work this out. There's nothing to work out, I cut him off. You made your choice a long time ago, Ethan. Now I'm making mine. As Ethan gathered his belongings, moving like a man in a daze, I sat at the kitchen table, my mind racing. I knew the road ahead would be hard. Explaining this to Mia, dealing with the inevitable fallout when the truth came out, it would be a nightmare. But as I heard the front door close behind Ethan for the last time, I felt a strange sense of calm. The life I thought I had was over, but in its place, I saw a chance for something new. A life built on truth, not lies. A life where I could protect Mia from the twisted web her father had woven. It wouldn't be easy, but as I climbed the stairs to wake Mia and begin the hardest conversation of our lives, I knew one thing for certain. We would survive this. We had to. The invitation to Owen's first birthday party sat on our kitchen counter like a ticking time bomb. Mia eyed it warily, her young face etched with a wariness no 13-year-old should possess. Do we have to go, Mom? She asked, her voice small. I sighed, pulling her close. I think we should, sweetie. He's still your cousin. The truth was, I dreaded this party as much as Mia did. But after months of separation and tense co-parenting arrangements, I felt we needed to make an appearance, if only to show Ethan we were moving on. As we pulled up to Elise's house, my stomach churned. Colorful balloons decorated the front yard, a cheerful facade that felt like a mockery of the turmoil beneath. Ethan greeted us at the door, his smile strained. Anna, Mia, I'm glad you came. Mia brushed past him without a word, heading straight for a group of cousins in the backyard. I followed Ethan inside, steeling myself for what lay ahead. The house was filled with family members, many of whom shot curious glances our way. I plastered on a smile, determined to get through this for Mia's sake. Elise approached, Owen balanced on her hip. Anna, thank you for coming, she said, her voice syrupy sweet. It means so much to us. I nodded stiffly, unable to form words. The sight of Owen, with his familiar blue eyes, Ethan's eyes, made my chest tighten. As the party progressed, I kept a watchful eye on Mia. She seemed to be holding up well, laughing with her cousins and pointedly avoiding Ethan and Elise. It wasn't until the cake-cutting ceremony that things took a turn. Ethan stood up, tapping his glass for attention. I'd like to make a toast, he announced, his eyes shining. To Owen, our beautiful boy, and to family, the bonds that tie us together no matter what. His gaze lingered on Elise, and I saw her blush. My stomach turned. Owen's arrival has made me realize what truly matters, Ethan continued. Family is everything, and I have a vision for our future, a future where our children carry on our legacy. I frowned, a sense of unease growing. In fact, Ethan said, his voice filled with misplaced pride, I've already started planning for Owen and Mia's future together. Wouldn't it be wonderful to see them united, keeping our family's bond strong? The room fell silent. I felt the blood drain from my face as the implications of his words sank in. What are you talking about? I demanded, my voice shaking. Ethan turned to me, his eyes bright with a fervor I didn't recognize. Think about it, Owen. Cousins united in marriage. It's perfect. Our family's legacy preserved. I stood up so quickly my chair toppled backward. Have you lost your mind? I hissed. Mia is 13. Owen is a baby. And they're cousins. It's not unheard of. Ethan argued, oblivious to the horrified looks around him. In many cultures. Stop it, I shouted. Just stop. This is sick, Ethan. You're sick. I scanned the room for Mia, panic rising when I couldn't see her. Then I heard a sob from the hallway. I rushed out to find Mia curled up on the floor, her body shaking. Oh, baby, I whispered, gathering her in my arms. I'm so sorry. We're leaving now. Ethan appeared in the doorway. Anna, wait, let me explain. There's nothing to explain. I spat, helping Mia to her feet. Stay away from us, Ethan. I mean it. As we hurried to the car, Mia clung to me, her tears soaking my shirt. Mom, she whimpered, what's wrong with Dad? I held her tighter, my mind racing. How could I protect her from this? How had things gone so terribly wrong? Driving away from Elise's house, I made a decision. This wasn't just about a broken marriage anymore. This was about protecting Mia from a toxic, twisted family dynamic that threatened to destroy her. As we pulled into our driveway, I turned to Mia, my resolve hardening. Pack a bag, sweetheart. We're going to Grandma and Grandpa's for a while. Mia nodded, relief flooding her tear-stained face. As she ran inside, I sat in the car, my hands gripping the steering wheel. I knew the road ahead would be tough, but I was ready to fight. For Mia, for our future, for the family we deserved. The drive to my parents' house was a blur of streetlights and Mia's muffled sobs. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, my mind racing with the enormity of what had just happened. As we pulled into the driveway, my mother rushed out, her face etched with concern. Anna, what's wrong? Is Mia okay? I shook my head, unable to form words. We stumbled inside, Mia clinging to me like a lifeline. It's Ethan, I finally managed to choke out. He's lost his mind. Over cups of strong tea, with Mia safely tucked away in the guest room, I poured out the whole sordid story to my parents. Their faces morphed from shock to horror to outrage. You can't go back there, my father said firmly. You and Mia will stay here as long as you need. I nodded gratefully, feeling a small measure of relief, but I knew this was just the beginning. The next morning, as Mia slept, my phone buzzed incessantly with messages from Ethan. Anna, please, let me explain. You're overreacting. Think of Mia. We can work this out. Come home. I deleted each one, my resolve strengthening with every plea. But then came a message that made my blood run cold. If you don't bring Mia home, I'll file for full custody. Don't test me, Anna. My hands shook as I showed the message to my parents. He can't do that, can he? I whispered. My father's face hardened. We won't let him. I'm calling our lawyer right now. The next few days were a whirlwind of legal consultations and hushed conversations. Mia wandered through the house like a ghost, her eyes haunted. I tried to shield her from the worst of it, but I knew she sensed the tension. On the fourth day, as I was helping my mother with dinner, the doorbell rang. My heart stopped when I saw Ethan standing there, his eyes wild. Where's Mia? He demanded, trying to push past me. I stood my ground. You need to leave, Ethan. Now. She's my daughter, he shouted. You can't keep her from me. Mia appeared at the top of the stairs, her face pale. Dad? Ethan's expression softened. Mia, sweetheart, come on, we're going home. I moved to block the stairs. She's not going anywhere with you. Ethan's face contorted with rage. He lunged forward, grabbing my arm. You can't do this, Anna. You can't take my family away from me. Let go of her. My father's voice boomed as he appeared from the kitchen, phone in hand. The police are on their way, Ethan. Leave now, or you'll be arrested. For a moment, I thought Ethan might actually hit my father. But then, as if deflating, he released my arm and stumbled back. This isn't over, he hissed. I'll see you in court. As he stormed off, I collapsed against the wall, my legs giving out. Mia rushed down the stairs, throwing herself into my arms. Mom, she sobbed, I'm scared. I held her tight, my own tears falling. I know, baby. I am too, but we're going to be okay. I promise. I promise. That night, as Mia finally slept, curled up next to me in the guest room bed, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. The life I'd known was gone, shattered beyond repair. The man I'd loved, the father of my child, had become a stranger. A threat. I knew the road ahead would be hard. A custody battle. The inevitable gossip and judgment from those who didn't know the whole story, the challenge of rebuilding our lives from scratch. But as I looked at Mia's peaceful face, I felt a fierce determination well up inside me. No matter what it took, no matter how hard I had to fight, I would protect my daughter. I would give her the safe, loving home she deserved, even if it meant facing down Ethan and his twisted family alone. As the first light of dawn crept through the window, I made a silent vow. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about reclaiming our lives, our happiness, our future. And I was ready for the fight. The courtroom felt suffocating as I sat, hands clasped tightly in my lap, waiting for the judge to return with her decision. Mia sat beside me, her face pale but determined. Across the aisle, Ethan glared, his eyes cold and unfamiliar. The past 6 months had been a nightmare of legal battles, therapy sessions, and sleepless nights. But through it all, Mia and I had grown stronger, our bond unbreakable in the face of adversity. The judge entered, her face unreadable. In the matter of custody for Mia Stewart, I've reached a decision. I held my breath, feeling Mia's hand slip into mine. Full custody is granted to Anna Stewart, with supervised visitation for Ethan Stewart, for pending completion of mandatory counseling and evaluation. Relief washed over me like a tidal wave. Mia threw her arms around me, tears streaming down her face. "We did it, Mom," she whispered. As we left the courtroom, Ethan approached, his face a mask of anger and desperation. "This isn't over, Anna. I'll appeal." "No, Ethan." I cut him off, my voice steady. "It is over. For Mia's sake, get help. Be the father she deserves." With that, we walked away, leaving behind the shattered remains of our old life. The next few months were a whirlwind of change. We moved into a small apartment, just Mia and me. I found a job at a local community center helping families in crisis. The irony wasn't lost on me, but the work felt right, like I was finally where I was meant to be. Mia thrived in her new school, making friends and rediscovering her love for art. Slowly, the haunted look left her eyes, replaced by a spark of joy and hope. One evening, as we sat on our tiny balcony watching the sunset, Mia turned to me. "Mom, are you happy?" I looked at her, really looked at the strong, resilient young woman she was becoming, and felt a surge of pride and love. "Yes, sweetheart, I am. Are you?" She nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "I am. I miss Dad sometimes, but I'm glad we're here. Just us." I pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "Me too, baby. Me too." As the years passed, our little family of 2 grew stronger. Ethan eventually completed his counseling and began supervised visits with Mia. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Elise and Owen faded into the background, a painful chapter closed. On Mia's 18th birthday, we threw a small party in our apartment. As I watched her blow out the candles, surrounded by friends and laughter, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. Later that night, as we cleaned up, Mia hugged me tightly. "Thank you, Mom," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "for everything, for being strong enough for both of us." Tears pricked my eyes as I held her close. "Oh, Mia, you were the strong one. You gave me the courage to fight." As she pulled away, wiping her eyes, she grinned. "We make a pretty good team, huh?" I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in years. The best. That night, as I lay in bed, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. The pain, the fear, the heartbreak, it had all led to this moment of quiet joy. I'd lost the life I thought I wanted, but I'd gained something far more precious, a true understanding of my own strength and an unbreakable bond with my daughter. I thought of the frightened, confused woman I'd been all those years ago, receiving that fateful phone call from Ethan. If I could go back, I'd tell her, "You're stronger than you know. Trust yourself. Fight for what matters. The road ahead is hard, but the destination is worth every step." As I drifted off to sleep, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. We'd weathered the storm, Mia and I. We'd faced the darkness and emerged into the light, scarred but unbroken. And whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew we'd face them together, with love, courage, and the unshakable bond between a mother and daughter. In the end, that was the greatest victory of all. I never imagined my mother-in-law's high school yearbook would upend my world, but there I was, staring at a faded black and white photo of 2 teenage girls, one unmistakably my mother, Helen, and the other, Beatrice, my husband's mother. They were classmates and, from the look of it, bitter rivals. "Julia?" You've been up here for ages. What are you doing? Ethan's voice drifted up from downstairs. I snapped the yearbook shut, my heart racing. Just a minute, I called back, trying to keep my voice steady. How could I tell my husband that our mothers shared a past neither of them had ever mentioned? As I descended the stairs of our cozy Victorian, Ethan's concerned face came into view. Everything okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. I forced a smile. Not a ghost exactly, but I think I've stumbled onto a family secret. Ethan's brow furrowed. What do you mean? Before I could answer, the doorbell rang. Ethan moved to answer it, and I felt my stomach drop as I heard Beatrice's voice. Darling, I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd pop by. She swept into the living room, her designer perfume filling the air. Her eyes landed on me and her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Julia, dear, how quaint you look today. I glanced down at my paint-splattered jeans and oversized sweater, suddenly feeling underdressed in my own home. Beatrice, what a surprise. We were just about to have lunch. Would you like to join us? Oh, I wouldn't dream of imposing, she said, even as she settled herself onto our antique sofa. I just wanted to remind Ethan about the country club gala next weekend. You'll both be attending, of course? Ethan shot me an apologetic look. Actually, Mom, we have plans that weekend. Julia's parents are celebrating their anniversary. Beatrice's lips pursed. I see. Well, I suppose family obligations must come first, even if they're not quite the same caliber of event. I felt my cheeks flush with anger. My parents' anniversary is very important to us, Beatrice. I'm sure you can understand that. Of course, dear, she said, her tone dripping with condescension. I'm sure it will be charming. Now, Ethan, about the new exhibit at your gallery. As Beatrice monopolized the conversation, my mind raced back to the yearbook upstairs. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her disdain for me and my family than simple snobbery. What had happened between her and my mother all those years ago? The afternoon dragged on, with Beatrice making thinly veiled comments about my background and my work at the local art museum. By the time she finally left, I felt drained and on edge. Ethan closed the door behind her with a sigh. I'm sorry about that, Jules. You know how she can be. I took a deep breath. Ethan, there's something I need to show you. I led him upstairs and pulled out the yearbook. As I opened it to the page with our mother's photos, Ethan's eyes widened in disbelief. Is that? I nodded. Your mom and mine. They went to school together. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. But why wouldn't they have told us? I don't know, I said, a knot forming in my stomach. But I think it's time we found out. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Sweetie, can you come over? There's something important we need to discuss. I showed Ethan the message, and we shared a look of apprehension. Whatever was going on, it was clear that the past was about to collide with the present in ways we couldn't have imagined. The drive to my parents' house was tense, with Ethan and I lost in our own thoughts. As we pulled up to the familiar yellow bungalow, I noticed Mom pacing on the porch. Julia, honey, she called, wringing her hands. I'm so glad you're here. We need to talk. I exchanged a glance with Ethan before following Mom inside. Dad was sitting in his armchair looking worried. What's going on? I asked, my stomach churning. Mom took a deep breath. We've been invited to a reunion party at the Holbrook estate next weekend. Beatrice's home. I felt the blood drain from my face. Mom, I found your old yearbook. You and Beatrice went to school together, didn't you? The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Dad spoke up. Helen, it's time to tell her the truth. Mom's eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry, sweetie. We should have told you long ago. Beatrice and I, we have a history. A bad one. Before she could continue, the doorbell rang. Dad went to answer it, and I heard a familiar, grating voice. Well, isn't this cozy? Beatrice swept into the living room, her eyes narrowing as she took in the scene. A little family gathering? How quaint. Ethan stood up, his face flushed. Mom, what are you doing here? Beatrice ignored him, focusing on my mother instead. Hello, Helen. It's been a long time. The tension in the room was palpable. Mom straightened her spine, meeting Beatrice's gaze. Not long enough, apparently. Beatrice's laugh was cold. Oh, come now. Surely you're not still holding a grudge after all these years? Water under the bridge, isn't it? What grudge? I demanded, looking between the two women. What happened between you two? Beatrice turned to me, her smile sharp. Oh, didn't your mother tell you? She stole the love of my life right out from under me, and now history seems to be repeating itself. I felt like I'd been slapped. What are you talking about? Julia, Ethan said, his voice strained. Maybe we should go. No, I said firmly. I want to hear this. Beatrice's eyes glittered with malice. Your mother was always so good at playing the innocent, but she knew exactly what she was doing when she seduced Thomas away from me. That's not true, Mom burst out. Thomas chose me, Beatrice. He never loved you. Lies, Beatrice hissed. And now your daughter has ensnared my son here just like you did. I felt my anger rising. I didn't ensnare anyone. Ethan and I love each other. Beatrice turned her venomous gaze on me. Love? What would you know about love? Coming from this. She gestured dismissively at my parents' modest home. Ethan stepped between us. That's enough, Mom. We're leaving. As he ushered me towards the door, Beatrice called out, Don't forget about the reunion, Helen. I'll be expecting you all there. It's time we settled this once and for all. The drive home was silent, the weight of Beatrice's words hanging heavy between us. As we pulled into our driveway, I finally spoke. Ethan, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. He cut me off with a gentle kiss. This isn't your fault, Jules, or your mom's. My mother, she's always been difficult, but I've never seen her like this. I leaned my head against his shoulder. What are we going to do? Ethan sighed. I don't know, but we'll figure it out together. As we walked into our house, my phone buzzed with a text from Mom. I'm sorry for everything. Please let me explain. Dinner tomorrow? I showed Ethan the message and he nodded. We need answers. All of us. I typed a quick reply. We'll be there. It's time for the whole truth. As I hit send, I couldn't shake the feeling that our lives were about to change dramatically. Whatever happened between our mothers in the past, it was clear that Beatrice wasn't going to let it go. And now, Ethan and I were caught in the crossfire of a decades-old feud. I looked at Ethan, seeing the worry in his eyes. No matter what happens, I said, squeezing his hand, we're in this together. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Together, he agreed. But as we settled in for the night, I couldn't help but wonder if our love would be strong enough to withstand the storm that was coming. The next evening, Ethan and I arrived at my parents' house, the air thick with anticipation. Mom greeted us with a strained smile, ushering us into the living room where Dad sat, his face etched with worry. It's time you knew everything, Mom began, her voice barely above a whisper. Beatrice, Thomas, and I were inseparable in high school, but Beatrice, she always wanted more. As Mom recounted the tale of their tumultuous past, I felt my heart sink. Thomas, the boy they both loved, had chosen my mother. Beatrice never forgave her. She swore she'd make me pay, Mom said, her eyes glistening. And now she's using you two to do it. Ethan's jaw clenched. This is insane. My mother can't possibly still be holding on to this grudge after all these years. Dad leaned forward, his expression grave. I'm afraid it's worse than that. We've heard rumors that Beatrice is trying to sabotage Julia's career at the gallery. My blood ran cold. What? How? Before anyone could answer, Ethan's phone buzzed. His face paled as he read the message. It's my father. He says Mom is on her way here. Now. Panic gripped me as we heard the screech of tires outside. Beatrice burst through the door, her eyes wild with fury. How dare you poison my son against me? She shrieked, pointing an accusing finger at my mother. Ethan stepped between them. Mom, stop this. You're embarrassing yourself. Beatrice's laugh was bitter. Embarrassing myself? Your precious Julia is the spitting image of her conniving mother. Can't you see she's manipulating you, just like Helen did to Thomas? I felt my temper flare. That's enough. I love Ethan, and he loves me. This has nothing to do with you or your ancient grudge. Beatrice's eyes narrowed. Oh, but it does. You think you've won, just like your mother did, but I won't let history repeat itself. She turned to Ethan, her voice suddenly soft. Darling, please, you can't marry her. She'll ruin you, just like her mother ruined Thomas. The room fell silent. I turned to Ethan, my heart pounding. Mary? Ethan's face flushed as he reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. This isn't how I planned to do this, but... He dropped to one knee, opening the box to reveal a stunning diamond ring. Julia, will you marry me? Tears sprang to my eyes as I nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. Ethan slipped the ring onto my finger, and we embraced, lost in our own world for a moment. Beatrice's enraged scream shattered our bubble of happiness. No, I forbid this. Ethan stood, his arm protectively around me. You can't forbid anything, Mom. I love Julia, and we're getting married. If you can't accept that, then you don't have to be part of our lives. Beatrice's face contorted with rage. You'll regret this, both of you. I'll make sure of it. With that, she stormed out, slamming the door behind her. In the stunned silence that followed, my mother approached us, tears in her eyes. I'm so sorry. This is all my fault. I hugged her tightly. No, Mom, this is Beatrice's doing, not yours. Ethan nodded, his expression determined. We won't let her come between us, any of us. As we stood there, our families united in the face of Beatrice's threat, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of our troubles. The ring on my finger, though beautiful, now felt like a target. What do we do now? I asked, looking at Ethan. His grip on my hand tightened. We fight. Together. As night fell, we made plans to confront Beatrice's schemes head-on. But deep down, I knew that our battle was far from over. Beatrice's vendetta had spanned decades. She wouldn't give up easily, and as I caught my reflection in the window, seeing my mother's features mirrored in my own, I realized that for Beatrice this wasn't just about the past. It was about destroying the future she felt she'd been denied. The morning after Ethan's proposal should have been filled with joy, but instead I woke to a frantic call from my father. Julia, it's gone. Everything's gone, he choked out. My heart raced as I rushed to dress. Dad, what are you talking about? The bookshop. We're bankrupt. I felt the floor drop out from under me. The family bookshop had been a cornerstone of our community for decades. How could this happen? Ethan drove us to the shop, his hand steady on mine. As we pulled up, I saw my parents standing outside, looking shell-shocked. The windows were dark, a stark, closed sign hanging on the door. I don't understand, I said, hugging my father tightly. How did this happen so suddenly? Mom's voice was bitter. It wasn't sudden. Someone's been working against us for months, canceling orders, spreading rumors about our financial stability. A chill ran down my spine. You don't think. Beatrice, Ethan finished, his jaw clenched. Before we could discuss further, my phone rang. It was the gallery director asking me to come in immediately. With a heavy heart, I left my parents, promising to return soon. At the gallery, I was met with chaos. Our star artist had pulled out of the upcoming show, citing concerns about the gallery's reputation. As I struggled to salvage the situation, a familiar voice cut through the noise. Such a shame, Beatrice purred, sauntering into my office. It seems misfortune follows your family wherever you go. I straightened, meeting her gaze. What do you want, Beatrice? Her smile was razor-sharp. To offer you a way out, of course. Break off this farce of an engagement with my son, and I'll make all of this. She waved her hand dismissively. Go away. You're behind this, I realized, fury building in my chest. The bookshop, the gallery. Beatrice shrugged elegantly. I merely pointed out some unfortunate truths to the right people. Your father's outdated business model, your questionable curatorial choices. I felt my hands shake with rage. You won't get away with this. Oh, but I already have, she said, leaning in close. Face it, Julia. You're not good enough for my son or this world. Do the right thing and walk away before you drag Ethan down with you. As she turned to leave, she paused at the door. Oh, and Julia? I'd hate for anything to happen to your mother's reputation. It would be a shame if certain youthful indiscretions came to light. The threat hung in the air as she swept out, leaving me reeling. I sank into my chair, my mind racing. How could I fight against someone with so much power and so little conscience? My phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. Everything okay? You've been gone for hours. I stared at the screen, Beatrice's words echoing in my head. Was she right? Was I dragging Ethan into a world of problems he didn't deserve? With shaking hands, I typed out a response. We need to talk. It's important. As I hit send, I felt the weight of my decision crushing me. I loved Ethan more than anything, but could our love withstand the storm Beatrice was unleashing? And more importantly, did I have the right to ask him to weather it with me? I looked down at the engagement ring on my finger, its sparkle now seeming to mock me. In that moment, I knew I had to make a choice, fight for our love and risk everything, or give in to Beatrice's demands and lose the future I dreamed of. As I left the gallery, the sun setting on what felt like the longest day of my life, I steeled myself for the conversation ahead. Whatever I decided, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. I paced our living room, waiting for Ethan to return from work. My mind raced with the day's events, the bookshop's bankruptcy, Beatrice's threats, and the looming decision I had to make. When Ethan finally walked in, his face etched with concern, I felt my resolve waver. "Jules, what's going on?" he asked, pulling me into a tight embrace. I took a deep breath. "Ethan, I think we need to postpone the wedding." His body stiffened. "Why?" As I recounted Beatrice's visit to the gallery and her ultimatum, Ethan's expression darkened. "We can't let her win, Julia. We can't let her dictate our lives." "But what about the bookshop? My parents have lost everything," I said, tears welling up. Ethan's eyes lit up suddenly. "Maybe not. Your dad called me earlier. He didn't want to get your hopes up, but he has a plan." Hope flickered in my chest as Ethan explained. Dad had been working on a new business model, a community-centered bookshop and cafe with space for local authors and artists. The bankruptcy, while devastating, could be a fresh start. "He's been keeping it quiet," Ethan said, worried that Beatrice might try to sabotage it if she found out. I felt a surge of pride for my father's resilience. "But how will he fund it?" Ethan squeezed my hand. "That's where we come in. I've been saving for a down payment on a house, but this is more important. We can invest in your dad's new venture." I was stunned by his generosity. "Ethan, I can't ask you to do that." "You're not asking, I'm offering," he said firmly. "We're a team, remember?" As we discussed the possibilities, a new determination filled me. We couldn't let Beatrice win, but how could we stop her vendetta once and for all? "We need to get to the root of this," I said. "The feud between our mothers has gone on long enough." Ethan nodded thoughtfully. "What if we brought them together, forced them to confront the past?" An idea began to form. "The jazz fete next month. We could invite them both, create an opportunity for them to talk." "It's risky," Ethan warned. "It could backfire spectacularly." "But if it works," I countered, "we might finally have peace." As we brainstormed our plan, my phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "Your father told me about his new idea. Are you sure about this investment?" I looked at Ethan, seeing the love and support in his eyes. "We're sure," I replied. Just then, Ethan's phone rang. His face paled as he answered. "Dad? What's wrong?" I watched as Ethan listened, his expression growing more troubled by the second. When he hung up, he looked shell-shocked. "My father's leaving my mother?" he said quietly. "He says he can't take her behavior anymore. He asked if he could stay with us for a while." The implications hit me like a tidal wave. Beatrice, alone and angry, would be more dangerous than ever. And now we'd be housing her estranged husband. "What do we do?" I asked, feeling overwhelmed. Ethan took a deep breath. "We stick to the plan. We bring our mothers together at the jazz fete. But now we have even more reason to make it work." I nodded, a mix of fear and determination coursing through me. It's all or nothing now. As we settled in for the night, the weight of our decisions pressed down on us. We were risking everything, our families, our futures, our love, on this gamble. But as I looked at Ethan, I knew we had no choice. We had to fight for our happily ever after, no matter the cost. Tomorrow, we'd start preparing for the jazz fete. It would be our battleground, the place where years of resentment and manipulation would finally come to a head. And one way or another, our lives would never be the same again. The night of the jazz fete arrived, and my nerves were frayed to the breaking point. Ethan and I had spent weeks planning this moment, hoping to finally bring our mothers face to face and end this decades-long feud. As we entered the elegantly decorated pavilion, the smooth sounds of jazz filled the air. I scanned the crowd, my heart racing when I spotted my mother, Helen, chatting with some old friends near the bar. "There's my mom," I whispered to Ethan. "Do you see Beatrice?" He shook his head, his brow furrowed. "Not yet. But she'll be here. She never misses a chance to show off." We made our way to Helen, who greeted us with a tight smile. "I still think this is a bad idea," she murmured. "Mom, please," I pleaded. "Just give it a chance." Before she could respond, a hush fell over the crowd. Beatrice had arrived, resplendent in a shimmering gown that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. Her eyes narrowed as she spotted us, and she made a beeline for our group. Well, she drawled, her voice dripping with disdain. "What a quaint little gathering." Helen stiffened beside me. Beatrice, you're looking, well. The tension was palpable as the two women faced each other for the first time in years. I held my breath, praying our plan would work. Suddenly, a booming voice cut through the awkward silence. "Helen, is that you?" We all turned to see Charles Worthington, a renowned philanthropist, approaching with a broad smile. "I haven't seen you since the last charity gala. Your work with the literacy program has been outstanding." Beatrice's jaw dropped as Charles continued to sing my mother's praises. "You know, Beatrice," he said, turning to her, "you really should get involved with Helen's initiatives. She's become quite the pillar of our community." I couldn't help but feel a surge of pride as I watched Beatrice struggle to maintain her composure. This was exactly what we'd hoped for. A chance for my mother to shine, to show Beatrice that she wasn't the small-town nobody she'd always believed her to be. But just as I thought we might be making progress, Beatrice's eyes flashed with fury. "Oh, Charles," she said, her voice sickly sweet, "you're so kind to humor Helen's little projects, but surely you know about her sordid past?" My mother paled. "Beatrice, don't." "Did you know," Beatrice continued, raising her voice so others could hear, "that our dear Helen once—" "That's enough," Ethan's voice rang out, startling us all. "Mother, this ends now. Your vendetta against Helen, your attempts to sabotage Julia's career and her family's business, it stops here." Beatrice's face contorted with rage. "How dare you speak to me like that? I am your mother." "And Julia is my fiancée," Ethan shot back. "The woman I love. If you can't accept that, then you're the one who'll be left behind." The crowd around us had grown silent, all eyes on our family drama unfolding. I felt a mixture of pride and terror as Ethan stood up to his mother for the first time. Beatrice's gaze swept over all of us, landing finally on me. "You," she hissed. "You've turned my own son against me, just like your mother stole Thomas all those years ago." "No one stole anyone," Helen said quietly. "It's time to let go of the past, Beatrice." For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of something, regret, pain in Beatrice's eyes, but it was quickly replaced by cold fury. "This isn't over," she spat, turning on her heel and storming out of the pavilion. As the crowd began to murmur and disperse, I felt my knees go weak. Ethan caught me, holding me close. "It's okay," he whispered. "We did it. We stood up to her." But as I looked at the faces around us, my shaken mother, the confused onlookers, and Ethan's determined expression, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. In fact, I feared we had just ignited a powder keg that threatened to explode and destroy everything we held dear. The aftermath of the jazz fete was like the calm before a storm. For days, an eerie quiet settled over our lives, but I knew Beatrice was plotting her revenge. I wasn't prepared for how swiftly and viciously it would come. It started with whispers. At the gallery, patrons would suddenly hush when I entered a room. At local cafes, I'd catch snippets of conversation. My mother's name, followed by hushed tones and sidelong glances. Then came the cancellations. Donors pulled out of upcoming exhibitions, citing concerns about the gallery's reputation. Artists I'd cultivated relationships with for years suddenly became unavailable. "It's Beatrice," Ethan said grimly one evening. "She's turning her social circle against us." I felt sick. How can she have so much influence? Before Ethan could answer, his phone rang. It was his father, Marcus. As Ethan listened, his face grew pale. He put the phone on speaker. "I had no idea how unhappy I've been," Marcus was saying. "Spending time with Helen and Pete, it's opened my eyes. The way Beatrice treats people, the constant manipulation, I can't do it anymore." My heart raced. Was Ethan's father leaving Beatrice? "Dad," Ethan said carefully, "what are you saying?" There was a heavy sigh on the other end. "I'm saying I want a divorce, and I'd like to stay with you and Julia for a while, if that's all right." The moment Marcus hung up, our doorbell rang. I opened it to find my mother, tears streaming down her face. "Julia," she sobbed, "Beatrice, she's telling everyone about my past, things I've never even told you." As I held my weeping mother, the full weight of Beatrice's retaliation hit me. She wasn't just trying to ruin our reputations, she was tearing our families apart. The next few days were a blur of crisis management. We tried to counter Beatrice's rumors, but her influence ran deep. My father's plans for the new bookshop stalled as investors pulled out. The gallery board called an emergency meeting to discuss my future. Through it all, Ethan stood by me, fierce and unwavering. but I could see the toll it was taking on him. The strain of choosing between his fiancée and his mother, the pain of watching his family fracture. It all came to a head one rainy afternoon. I was at the gallery, pleading my case to the board, when Ethan burst in, his face ashen. "Jules," he said, his voice shaking, "it's your dad. He's in the hospital." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "What? Why?" "Stress-induced heart attack," Ethan said softly. "Your mom's with him now." I felt my knees give way, and Ethan caught me before I could fall. As he held me, I saw Beatrice sweep into the room, a triumphant gleam in her eye. "Well," she said, her voice dripping with false concern, "I heard about your father, Julia. Such a shame. Perhaps if he hadn't been so ambitious with his little bookshop scheme, this wouldn't have happened." Something inside me snapped. All the fear, all the pain, all the anger I'd been holding back came rushing to the surface. "Enough!" I shouted, my voice echoing through the gallery. "You've won, Beatrice. Is this what you wanted, to destroy everything and everyone around you?" Beatrice's smug expression faltered for a moment, replaced by something that looked almost like regret, but I was beyond caring. "I'm done," I said, my voice breaking. "You can have your social circle, your reputation, everything. Just leave us alone." I turned to Ethan, tears streaming down my face. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I can't do this anymore. I can't be the reason your family falls apart." As I ran out of the gallery into the pouring rain, I heard Ethan calling my name. But I didn't look back. I couldn't. Because I knew if I did, I might not have the strength to do what I knew I had to do. To walk away from the man I loved, to save him from having to choose between his mother and me. In that moment, soaked to the bone and feeling more alone than ever, I realized that sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes the price of happiness is just too high. I stood outside the hospital, rain pelting my face, torn between rushing to my father's side and fleeing from the chaos Beatrice had unleashed. Suddenly, I heard rapid footsteps behind me. "Julia, wait!" Ethan's voice cut through the storm. He grabbed my arm, spinning me to face him. "You can't leave. Not now." "Ethan." No," he interrupted, his eyes blazing with determination. "We're not letting her win. Not this time." Before I could respond, Charles Worthington appeared, umbrella in hand. "Julia, Ethan, thank goodness I found you. There's something you need to see." Confused and wary, we followed Charles back into the hospital. To my shock, a crowd had gathered in the lobby, including many of Beatrice's high society friends. At the center stood Beatrice herself, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. "What's going on?" I whispered to Ethan. Charles stepped forward, his voice ringing out. "Ladies and gentlemen, I've called you here because it's time the truth came to light." He produced a stack of documents. "These are records of bribes and blackmail Beatrice has been using to manipulate her social circle. She's been lying to all of you, using your secrets to control you." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Beatrice's face drained of color. "That's not all," Charles continued. "She's been sabotaging local businesses, including Julia's family bookshop, all in a misguided attempt to settle an old grudge." I watched in awe as Beatrice's carefully constructed world crumbled around her. Her friends turned away in disgust, whispering among themselves. Suddenly, Marcus pushed through the crowd. "Beatrice," he said, his voice heavy with disappointment, "I've filed for divorce. I can't be part of this toxicity any longer." Beatrice's eyes darted wildly, landing on Ethan and me. For a moment, I saw something I'd never seen in her before. Vulnerability. "Ethan," she pleaded, "you can't believe this. I did it all for you, to protect you from what, Mom?" Ethan asked softly. "From love? From happiness? Julia and her family have shown me more love and acceptance than you ever have." Beatrice crumpled, sobs racking her body. As much as I wanted to feel triumphant, I felt only pity. I stepped forward, surprising even myself. "Beatrice," I said gently, "it's over. The grudge, the manipulation, all of it. It's time to let go of the past." She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. I don't know how," she whispered. In that moment, I saw not the formidable woman who had tormented us, but a scared, lonely person clinging to old wounds. "We'll help you," I said, looking at Ethan, who nodded in agreement. "But first, you need to make amends." Over the next few hours, a lifetime of secrets and resentments came pouring out. Beatrice apologized to Helen, to Marcus, to Ethan, and finally, to me. It wasn't easy, and I knew we had a long road ahead, but it was a start. As the storm outside subsided, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. My father was recovering, the truth was out, and our families, though battered, were beginning to heal. Ethan took my hand, leading me to a quiet corner. "Julia," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "after everything we've been through, I love you more than ever. Will you still marry me?" Tears welled in my eyes as I nodded, pulling him close. "Yes," I whispered. 1,000 times, yes. In the days that followed, our community rallied around us. The gallery board reinstated me, investors returned to support my father's new bookshop venture, and even Beatrice, humbled and contrite, began the long process of making amends. As Ethan and I stood in front of our new home, a modest but warm house we'd chosen together, I realized that love truly could conquer all. Not just romantic love, but the love of family, of community, and of forgiveness. We had weathered the storm, emerging stronger and more united than ever. And as I looked at Ethan, at our families coming together to help us move in, I knew that this was just the beginning of our greatest adventure yet. The past no longer held us captive. We were free to write our own story, one filled with love, understanding, and the unbreakable bonds of family, both the ones we're born into and the ones we choose.